So the only thing that you've done is make a gigantic film that hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people will see. And the only mention that you saw fit to inject of something Christ adjacent was a dismissal of the notion, saying that anybody who did express that notion stood in the way of progress. Something that I've actually heard you say on your review of Age of Disclosure. You echoed those exact same sentiments. You said that those people who said demonic and demons were misguided.
These individuals are misguided.
Which is the exact same thing that was said on that documentary. They just said those people stood in the way of progress.
They're actually working against the interest of disclosing the truth.
So what you've done now is, to the average person who's not well researched, who doesn't have the analytical mind, who doesn't even have the time, you've subliminally planted a little seed in their head. And that is, religious people have stood in the way of progress because of things like labeling this demonic or of the devil, which means that anytime they hear that in the future, they're going to scoff and recoil at that. What this leads to, according to the New Age and a multitude of other things, including the Bible, is a falling away and a consolidation of the religions, one world religion under this new umbrella. But you have to actually get Christianity out of the way. It's not unremarkable or insignificant that in this gigantic documentary, the only thing they saw fit to do was dismiss it in the most flippant ways.
They're not Christians. A lot of these guys are Christians. They're not approaching
to explore this phenomenon without Christianity, without being rooted in Jesus Christ, as we just said, rooted in the gospel. Rooted in the gospel is what you said, right? And so the biggest mouthpiece on this phenomenon are not rooted in the Bible. Joining us today is Timothy Alberino. Before we get into the discussion, Tim, let's let everybody know what it is that you do. What is your work focused on?
So you guys are only going to publish the first 20 minutes of this and then put the rest of it behind your paywall?
Yes. Yeah, because we're greedy and we're disgusting.
No, it'll be, we want to give it as much of a chance to get seen as possible. So we're going to polish it up. Nothing will be edited, of course. It'll just be, it'll look a lot nicer.
Only the first 20 minutes are going to be public. Correct?
No, for now, for about a week, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, when we get, it'll all be out.
All right, so you're going to assure me that the totality of this thing can be seen by people for free?
Yes, it will be seen for free.
Okay.
Everything that happens here will be seen for free. It'll just look a little bit better.
Yeah, less sleepy.
Because it sounded like you were going to just publish the first 20 minutes and put the rest of it behind a paywall on Patreon.
Yes, for about 4 to 5 days.
Okay, for a limited period of time. Okay.
Yes, that's right.
All right. Now, what did you ask me?
I asked you, let the people know who may not be familiar with you, what it is that you focus on.
I don't really have a particular focus. I have an eclectic suite of topics that I'm always talking about, ranging from alternative history to legends of ancient giants, the UFO phenomenon, transhumanism, and everything in between, philosophy, politics. I'm probably most well known for my work in the UFO space and giants and stuff I've done in Peru.
All right. I think that's a good overview. If it's all the same to you, I want to jump straight into sort of the content or the meat of this. Just so the audience is aware, we had a little bit, I wouldn't call it a disagreement. I maybe took some comedic liberties with some outfit choices that you've had in the past, and I may be currently doing that, but it's just in my nature. And it got your attention. And the thing that
you may be currently doing that,
I might be currently doing that.
Very disrespectful.
I don't think that it's fair that he has such a stranglehold on a cool outfit. I would also like to.
Well, I have never dressed up as a homosexual version of Indiana Jones as you are right now. So.
The only thing you have on me is maybe a higher quality hat. I carry a whip in public, which I've yet to see you do, and I think that speaks to my convictions when it comes to my love for Indiana Jones.
Sir.
There we go.
You have me there.
A lot of the topic that we were going back and forth on Twitter about was the nature of the alien phenomenon, and as you said previously, you're best known for your work in that field, among other things. And so the sticking point, the point of contention was kind of a verbose one. It was this idea of aliens are demons, which is a blanket statement and admittedly very reductive. I hope to get at the heart of that today. And so the first question that I want to ask you, which you are in opposition to, right? Let's just be clear with that. Aliens are not demons in the blanket sense, is your position?
Yeah, something like that. I would actually like to hear your guys's theory of the case before I say anything, because I don't really understand what it is that you guys believe.
That's
So
fair.
why don't you lay out your hypothesis of the, let's call it the UFO phenomenon and the alien presence?
That is a lofty endeavor at the opening of this show, and I'll not be allowing you to steer this show, Mr. Alberino. And so back to my original question, which was going to be, what are demons? I'm just trying to lay the groundwork here, and then we're going to work up to this, because as you probably are aware and will agree with, this is a multifaceted subject, very nuanced. It's going to take a lot of digging through the weeds to get through all this. So I thought a good place to be would to be defining what a demon is.
Okay, so are we framing this conversation within a theological context? Are we talking a biblical understanding of demons here, or are we talking a pop culture understanding of demons?
I think we're talking about what you think specifically. This is the entire contention of this
what
episode.
I think is irrelevant. So it depends on what your perspective is. Now I come from a biblical perspective, and so I would frame, if you're going to invoke the word demons, you're using a biblical term. And you have the idea of demons in other cultures and other religions, like the jinn to the Muslims. But I think what you guys mean is demons in the biblical sense. So if you're going to talk about demons within the biblical context, then you have to refer to the cosmological worldview of the ancient Hebrews. Otherwise, you're no longer using the term biblically. Now, the word demons has been mangled and redefined, and it's in the words of Bilbo Baggins, it's like butter spread over too much bread. It's used very, very broadly today, and it's the use of it is so broad that it really doesn't mean anything anymore. So the first thing that we have to do is define our terms. So within the context of biblical cosmology, of ancient Hebrew cosmology, a demon is something very, very specific. It is exclusively the disembodied spirit of a Nephilim. That's all it is in the biblical context. These are the unclean spirits, the evil spirits, those spirits that seek to inhabit human flesh, the ones that Jesus encounters and the disciples of the New Testament. You don't see them so much in the Old Testament, although there are some appearances. That is what a demon is. It is a disembodied spirit, the spirit of a dead giant. Now, there's some other terms that people often will conflate with demon, and this term is a contrivance, so I don't like it very much, but people like to use the term fallen angel, which isn't a biblical term. I would concede that it's a biblical concept, but it's not a biblical term. And a fallen angel is something different, something altogether different. These are beings who are extraterrestrial in provenance and who are sometimes referred to, especially in the New Testament, as angels. In the Old Testament, the term angel, the word angel, is a descriptor. It's an occupational descriptor. It's not a designation of kind or classification of kind. It's just an occupational descriptor. It's a job description. So these beings, you have the faithful angels in heaven, and then you have the insubordinate or apostate angels on earth. And we're going to switch the word angel here for a much more definitive word, which would be sons of God. So you have the sons of God in heaven who are faithful to the King of heaven, and then you have the sons of God on earth who are in a state of insubordination, insurrection, and apostasy. So they are the apostate sons of God, and a cohort of that group is here on earth. Now, that group often gets conflated with demons, but there's a delineation, biblically speaking, between the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim and the very much embodied apostate sons of God. And so this is the problem. Right in the beginning of a conversation like this, we have to accept these definitions, or we're going to keep talking past each other. Do you guys accept
No,
those
we-
definitions?
I think we're all in agreement
Yeah.
with all of this so
To
far.
be honest, most of our understanding of this comes from you, your earlier work, and even your more current work. So yeah, no, we're in complete agreement here. As I'd say, I don't know, the fallen angels would be the parents of these demons / Nephilim.
Well, not all of them. So what the Bible defines as the devil and his angels are different from the watchers. 200 watchers descended in the days of Jared. Now, when those beings descended to the earth, the devil and his angels, these apostate sons of God, they were here already. They were here. So these are two different groups, although in my opinion, and you don't have to agree with this, but in my opinion, these are the same. These are the same. Let's use this term. These are the same species, the watchers and the devil and his angels. They all hail from what I call in my book Birthright the elder race, from this angelic civilization. Therefore, they look the same. And I'll deal with another misconception before we get into aliens. There's a misconception that the quote unquote fallen angels have a different appearance than the faithful angels in heaven. Again, that the faithful sons of God are beautiful, are these regal beings, and that the insubordinate apostate sons of God are these grotesque, devilish looking beings. And that's not, there's nowhere in scripture that suggests that that's the case. And people use the verse, the passage about Satan presenting himself as a minister, as an angel of light. Well, the word there is angel, which means messenger or minister. He's a messenger of light. He presents himself as a good guy when in fact he is a bad guy. That's not to say that he metamorphosizes his appearance from something ugly to something beautiful. There's no reason to believe that the sons of God, that the good sons of God look any different than the bad sons of God. Now, there's a couple of caveats we could discuss later if you want in regard to their appearance, but that's just not the case. Angels, as you guys I'm sure are well aware, do not have wings. And in the biblical context, whenever there's an angel that's introduced into the narrative, they always look like us. Rather, we look like them. In fact, we find out both in Genesis 6, but then also more broadly speaking in the Second Temple literature, especially in the book of Enoch, that not only do we look similar, but we are reproductively compatible with them. We can procreate. So we're very similar to the angels in regard to our physiology. We're not the same as angels, but we're similar to them. They use technology. And I think that we can infer that they therefore manufacture technology. The angels are described in various passages of the Old Testament as arriving to the earth or flying around the earth at the helms of what I would describe as an advanced aerospace vehicle, what the Bible calls the chariots of God, or the chariots of Israel, the chariots of fire. Now, I think we can all concede that horses don't fly. They're not designed to fly. Therefore, chariots don't fly. Therefore, what these Iron Age people are describing is something much more akin to an airplane or an aerospace craft. Angels eat and drink. They do so on several occasions in the Bible, including with Abraham and then with Lot. And I don't think that they eat and drink just for show. I think they eat and drink because they eat and drink in the kingdom of heaven. In fact, in the psalmist says that the children of Israel ate the grain of heaven in the wilderness, the sustenance of the angels. That, of course, was manna. And manna wasn't bread, it was grain that was collected and baked into bread. And the Israelites ate that bread in the wilderness. And if we're to take the psalmist literally, then we're talking about grain that is from heaven. It is literally the sustenance of angels. So what I'm trying to do here is illustrate that the kingdom of heaven and the beings that inhabit it, specifically the sons of God, are not all that different from us. And there's a stark difference between the sons of God and the unclean spirits, the evil spirits, the demons. There's an important distinction there. They are disembodied. Demons are disembodied. And again, their origin is exclusively in the antediluvian world. They were these unclean spirits proceeded from the bodies of dead giants. And those spirits wander the earth as vagabond wraiths, bodiless vagabond wraiths. And they have all of the desires of the flesh. According to the book of Enoch, they're hungry, they're thirsty, but they have no flesh through which to fulfill these dire desires, to satiate their appetites. And I often like to compare this to the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, in which Captain Barbosa and his crew are cursed with this Mayan curse. And it's very much like the curse of the Nephilim in that they are hungry, they're thirsty, they want to eat. Barbosa wants to take a bite of the apple, but they can't because they're these wraiths. Their true natures disallows them to enjoy any kind of food or drink. And that is precisely the condition of the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. So those are important distinctions. Now, there are, of course, embodied Nephilim, I think, still in the world, in Afghanistan, for example. Those embodied Nephilim are encountered in the Old Testament in multiple occasions, especially in the land of Canaan, in which you have clans of giants who descend from the Nephilim. The Anakim, for example, who descend from the Nephilim. Those were embodied Nephilim. Those are Nephilim still living and breathing. And one could make the case that any Nephilim, at any time when it dies, its spirit departs from its body and is cursed to wander the earth as a disembodied wraith with all the desires of flesh, but with no flesh through which to fulfill these desires. So it's a very torturous condition.
So
those
Timothy,
are that's the parameter of those are the parameters of this conversation if we're going to invoke these biblical terms from my perspective.
Okay, that's fair. I will disagree that angels look just like us. The Bible, number of times, you said they don't have wings, but I know in the Bible a number of times it describes them as having wings.
Where?
Sometimes 6. The cherub, I mean, there's multiple passages in Isaiah.
Specifically seraphim and cherubim, but I think Timothy Alberino is just referring to common angels that don't have wings, like the seraphim.
Well, those are angels, but if we're talking about this this vast plurality of angels, we have to talk about all of them. So there are clear biblical references.
I'm going to save you those references. All of the references with angels having wings are within the context of prophetic iconography, all of them. And scholars are unanimous in their description of angels in regard to them not having wings and looking like us, and they disregard those descriptions which are found within the passages of prophetic utterances, of oracles.
So they disregard the Bible. Okay.
No. They disregard those descriptions as being literal anatomical descriptions of angels. There's only a couple of them, and they refer to cherubim, seraphim, and then there's a passage in Daniel with these two stork-like beings. All of this is obviously symbolic. The cherubim are the way that they're depicted is clearly symbolic because cherubim are depicted in two different ways. And so if you're going to invoke a cherubim, then you have to tell me which one you're talking about. In one case, the cherubim have 4 faces: the face of a man, the face of an ox, the face of a lion, and the face of an eagle. And of course, they have wings and eyes all around. In the other case, they are a composite of 4 creatures. They have the 4 parts of a lion, the hind parts of an ox. They have the wings of an eagle and the face of a man. So which cherubim are we talking about? Clearly, these are symbolic creatures. And these are not anatomical descriptions of literal beings. Anything that is...
No, I disagree.
Anything that is
25.
anything in the scriptures that is beheld within the context of a vision or a dream, because that's what the prophecy, the prophets, when they have these experiences, and it's within the prophetic material that you find the depictions of wings. Whenever a prophet is having a prophetic experience, he is either dreaming, he's either asleep, or he is in a trance. But there's not a single occasion, not anywhere in the Bible, and not anywhere, by the way, in any extra biblical text. Well, let's be more specific. Not in the book of Enoch, where a prophet or a patriarch is physically taken to heaven. That's never the case. Even with Enoch in the book of Enoch, he never goes to heaven. He's always dreaming, always, in every case. So the prophet is asleep, or he is sitting by the river, or what have you, in a trance. What does that tell you? That tells you that the experience is perceptual, that this individual, be it Isaiah or Ezekiel or any of the prophets, Jeremiah, their experience is happening in a perceptual world. They didn't go anywhere. You could walk up to them and they would either be laying in their bed completely asleep, in deep REM sleep. You could poke them. They're right there in their bed. Or they'd be sitting somewhere in a trance. And so they're having a perceptual experience. They're not actually going anywhere. And we would all concede, if you had a dream, if you had a really profound dream, let's say you had a dream last night, it was a very, very profound dream, and so profound that when you woke up this morning, you wondered if you actually had gone somewhere or if you were just laying in your bed dreaming, and you saw all manner of strange things in your dream. You saw centaurs flying around with wings and fawns and all kinds of mythological creatures and rainbows and all different kinds of symbolic images. When you woke up in the morning, you would not assume that anything that you saw in your dream was literal. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't go meet your friend at the coffee shop and say, hey, I saw a centaur yesterday. I saw one. It was there. I saw one. These things are real. You would never do that. You would always preface that statement with, last night I had a crazy dream in which I saw these things. So these are perceptual experiences, and the material, the information that is delivered to prophets through a perceptual experience is symbolic. It's meant to convey information. And that is the case with cherubim. That is the case with seraphim, and everything that is beheld within those kinds of perceptual experiences. It is a world of symbolism, and it has to be interpreted as such, or you'll make the mistake of attempting to derive literal interpretations from symbolic iconography from the ancient Near East.
Well, to be fair, though, it's not just a vision where Elisha's servant shows up. They're surrounded by the camp of the Syrian army. They look up into the mountains and there's horses and chariots of fire. I agree, if Isaiah in chapter 6, he's seeing these six-winged seraphim, they're flying around, they're saying, holy, 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 and they bring this coal down and put it on his lip. I see what you're saying, where that's in a vision that potentially those six-winged creatures don't exist. I don't know. I think there's maybe some debate on that, but I think that's going to take the conversation sideways, because what we're really discussing.
No, I think this is what we're.
Hold on, but it is like the Hebrews passage that says, "Be careful entertaining strangers unaware, because some have entertained angels." And I think that's Timothy Alberino's point, is that they are this elder race that we're so compatible with. We look so much like. There can even be intermingling of sex. But this is the type of angel that we're talking about, is the ones that do look like humans.
Okay, but I do want to make the point, because I think it pertains to the overall argument that David is proposing with Timothy Alberino. There's multiple scriptures where they're described in the same way. And whether this is an encounter in a dream realm or in a lucid state or waking, which is up for debate, it's still over and over. So we have a couple of testimonial accounts in the Bible itself, which I adhere to firmly. And it's describing these guys as having wings. I have five scriptures here, and we're just talking about just the cherubim. We're not talking about the seraphim as well. By that same logic, then, if we're talking about aliens, grays, most of these encounters that we're going to, I'm sure you're going to produce evidence. Most of these come in states of sleep paralysis, deep sleep, REM sleep,
I totally
abduction.
disagree.
Oh, well, I don't. I mean, but all right. So I think
Do we want to go?
get
There
into it,
was
yeah.
a question that I did have though on, just in the nature of the Nephilim, and I know we conventionally describe them as giants. I wonder then if you could surmise it quickly, and I know it's a big ask because it's a big topic, but how then do you interpret the chimeric creatures that were part of various pantheons, like the Greek pantheons, for example, where you have half man, half animal gods? Are these physical entities, in your opinion? Are they a byproduct of, fallen angels or angels that were cast down mating with human beings? Or are these strictly spiritual entities that are not a byproduct of interspecies, mingling, and are just these things that exist in the spiritual realm?
Well, first, I guess in the first place, I would contest the idea that there's a spiritual realm. But these composite beings from ancient Near Eastern and Greek mythology are, I believe, and this isn't going to surprise you, symbolic. And there's a lot of indication, and in fact, I would say evidence that they are in fact symbolic. Now, whether or not any of these creatures actually existed, whether or not centaurs were real, I don't know. It's a lot of people like to think that these were the result of like a watcher copulating with a horse. There is an indication, it could be interpreted this way, from the Dead Sea Scroll Book of Giants, in which there's mention of watchers selecting each of them, selecting a particular kind of animal to copulate with. Or you could also interpret that, because it's highly fragmented, the text, you could also interpret that as these angels not copulating with these creatures, but engaging in what we would today call cross-species genetics. Now, it should be noted that the Book of Giants, there's no way to know if the Book of Giants is an authentic text that was taken as veritable history by the Hebrews. Certainly the Book of Enoch was. Portions of the Book of Enoch, let me be careful there, the earliest portions, namely the Book of the Watchers, the historical portion. I would also contend the Book of Parables, which is within First Enoch. But there, outside of that one reference in the Book of Giants, I'm not convinced that the Watchers were producing these chimeric creatures in the antediluvian world. I'm not opposed to the idea. It seems rather fanciful. If you refer to Greek mythology, if you refer to the iconography of the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Near East in general, clearly these creatures are symbolic, just as they are in the Bible. And much of this is astrological. And in fact, I would say most of this is astrological. And because we've lost this body of information, we don't think like ancient people do. We don't understand the heavens the way that they did. We miss the astrological meaning behind all of this. Let me demonstrate what I mean.
Well, can I say one thing really quick? Because again, where we're having, I see where we're having this butting of heads. I just described to you 4 passages in the Bible that describe an angel or a cherubim as having a pretty crazy description. You contend that that's only within this, I don't know, I guess, but you're not even using the term spirit realm.
No,
you're
symbolic.
You're saying that that's symbolic, but it's mentioned 4 times by different
within
people.
the context of prophetic iconography, within a prophetic perceptual experience.
Okay, so
that's where those references come from. And
it has to be that way, though.
But I told you that there's 2 different descriptions of cherubim in the Bible. They're not the same. And I was just about to use the cherubim as an example. So you take the cherubim and you look at the 4 faces of the cherubim, or if you're reading the verse in which it's a composite of 4 creatures, same 4 creatures, it doesn't matter. Let's take the description where the 4 faces are different. So you have the face of a man, then you have the face of an eagle, then you have the face of a lion, and then you have the face of an ox. Okay. So is there a correspondence to something in the ancient Near East, in the iconography of the ancient Near East? Do we have a correspondence? because the Bible was written by people from the ancient Near East. It was written in that culture, to that culture, using the symbology of that culture and the ideas from that culture. And that's abroad. We're broadly speaking of Mesopotamia and the Eastern Mediterranean in general, the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Greeks and the Persians and so forth. That's what I mean when I invoke the ancient Near East and the Canaanites. And within the midst of that, the Israelites themselves. And remember, Abraham came from Mesopotamia. That was his culture. So as it pertains to cherubim, we have to ask the question, are cherubim unique to the biblical text? Are they unique to the Bible? The answer is clearly no, they're not. The cherubim are prevalent all over the ancient Near East. You have to this day depictions of cherubim on the ancient walls of Babylon and temples of Babylon. These are ubiquitous across the ancient Near East. They're symbolic of throne guardians. That's what the cherubim represent, not just in the Bible, but in the ancient Near East Eastern context. Generally speaking, they're throne guardians. That's how they're depicted. In sometimes they're depicted as a different composite of creatures, but in many cases, they're literally what the Bible describes in Babylon. And there's some Sumerian depictions of this kind of thing as well. So we have to concede that these creatures are symbolic in the ancient Near East. This is iconography. And in the Bible, it's very specific in both references to cherubim, in the multiple references to cherubim, these four composites, the composite of these four creatures. So when we take a look at the four creatures, we realize that there is a correlation to what we call today the zodiac. And when I invoke the zodiac, people think immediately that we are now in a pagan arena. Not so. The Hebrews had the zodiac. They called it the Mazzaroth. In fact, were you to go back in time, during the time of Christ, if you were to enter a synagogue, many of the synagogues had a depiction of the zodiac on the wall, which is called the Mazzaroth. And the Mazzaroth appears in the Bible in several passages, a couple in Job and elsewhere. In fact, there's many passages that reference the signs of the Mazzaroth, the signs of the zodiac. Those appear all over the place. And I would contend that the depiction of the cherubim is an invocation of the zodiac. Why? Because again, you have the face of the man. The face of the man is representative of the sign of Aquarius, which is a man carrying a pitcher of water or pouring out a pitcher of water. That's the sign of Aquarius. That's the man. Then you have the face of the eagle. And by the way, these are the cardinal directions of the zodiac. These aren't just random zodiacal constellations. These are the cardinal constellations of the zodiac. Aquarius is the man. The eagle is Scorpio. Now, Scorpio, most people think Scorpio is a scorpion, and it is, but it's also an eagle. It's the only zodiacal constellation, the only zodiacal sign that has a dual aspect. It's a scorpion and an eagle. You can find it represented as both a scorpion and an eagle in various places throughout the ancient Near East. So the face of the eagle is Scorpio. Then you have the face of the lion. Well, that's Leo. That's the zodiacal constellation of Leo, the house of Leo. Then you have the face of the ox, which is, of course, Taurus. Those are the four cardinal directions of the zodiac. That's not coincidental. That is not coincidental. That is intentional. Furthermore, the cherubim are covered in eyes all around, it says. Well, the word for eyes and I don't have it in front of me here, but the word for eyes, see if I can remember if it pops into my brain, the Hebrew word for eyes is used interchangeably with the word for stars, because the eyes twinkle, the eyes glisten like the stars. So those words, the idea is interchangeable between eyes and stars. Again, your eyes glisten, they gleam. And so if you think of the eyes as stars, then if you look at the zodiacal constellations, if you look up at the night sky at the constellation of Leo, what is it full of? What is that constellation full of? Stars. In other words, it's full of eyes. This is a clear indication that this is astrological information being conveyed. And when you invoke astrological information, what you're talking about is time. So the zodiac is a clock, and it's a clock that I could prove from the Bible was created by God. And we know that the heavenly bodies were created for signs and seasons. The zodiac is very ancient. It goes back to the antediluvian world. I believe the knowledge was given to Adam. And what it does primarily is it calculates cyclic cataclysm. Okay, so it's very, very important. The ancients thought of it as the great mill in the sky. It is ubiquitous across the world. And what we've forgotten this information, but it was very well known in the ancient Near East. So an ancient Near Eastern astrologer, if they were confronted with the symbology of a chimeric creature, again, let's use the cherubim as a reference here, they would automatically interpret that chimeric creature in astrological terms. And they would derive from that interpretation a very particular meaning. They would never take it literal. And again, because these visions of these creatures are in the Bible, of these chimeric creatures, are perceived within the context of a dream or a trance. In other words, this is a visionary world. We know that it's symbolic, and it has to be unpacked. It has to be deciphered, decoded.
So there's no part of your theology that includes the idea of, let's say, a spiritual realm. I saw that you had some contention with that. Or let's say like a Michael Heiser's unseen realm, where these beings exist in a reality within this spiritual realm. These are spiritual beings. Let's say they don't have to be flesh and blood, some sort of chimeric creature, a mix-up of fallen angels and something else. Do you at all subscribe to that ideology of the unseen realm, as specifically Michael Heiser puts it, and that these old gods were not just symbolic, maybe they were part symbolic, but actual creatures that did exist in a realm that parallels ours or overlays ours, but are actual creatures, not just pure metaphor or symbolism for the zodiac or otherwise?
No, I would think that the cherubim, for example, are symbolic of real creatures, but not their anatomy is not representative of those creatures. Rather, the cherubim represent, I believe the cherubim represent the princes, the sons of God, the highest order of sons of God. So when you let's invoke the word Irim, watcher. Egregori, the watchers in the Greek. The watchers, what the term watcher can be thought of as, this is an occupational descriptor, just like the word angel. And it can be thought of as a being who watches, obviously, but the word watch, or to watch, is also synonymous with to watch over or to guard, right? So if you're looking at beings who are watching in the sense that they're watching over, they're guardians, then you're deriving the same meaning from watcher as you would from cherubim, a throne guardian, based on the iconography of the ancient Near East. So these are the same, from my perspective, these are the same thing. The cherubim represent watchers, and watchers are guardians. And what does it mean to be a guardian in the kingdom? It's a prince. So when the Bible invokes princes, it's talking about very high-ranking sons of God who are imbued with authority to govern in the kingdom of heaven. Now, when you invoke a spiritual realm, you have to define your terms here, because Heiser, I disagree with Heiser on this point. Heiser would invoke a spiritual realm, but never define it, except to say that it's a disembodied realm. Well, I don't see any evidence whatsoever that there's a disembodied realm.
Would you prefer the terminology dimension, alternate dimension, other dimension? It seems like a popular expression within ufology today, that these entities come from an alternate dimension or a portal.
I'm also having a hard time how you're completely disregarding that term when, like, in popular culture today, we have means of getting into this extra dimensional realm, interdimensional realm, spiritual realm just through like the means of DMT. Like Joe Rogan made this fairly famous. People go in there, they all experience the same thing. What is
Where are
this
they
realm?
going?
They're going into some kind of under tapestry of a realm.
Wherever they're going,
If you were to
it
walk up to
seems
a
that
person,
the
which I've
modern
done,
day. Go ahead.
if you were to walk up to a person, which I've done, who's under the influence of DMT, let's say ayahuasca, that individual hasn't gone anywhere, have they? Did they go into a different realm, or are they just there, you know, puking in a bucket? Or are they? Did they go somewhere? What
Can their
realm did they
spirit
go
go
to?
somewhere? Can their
What's
spirit go
that?
somewhere? Can their spirit go somewhere like Elisha
Okay, so
talks about when,
now we're see, what I'm doing is I'm forcing us to define our terms here.
well, if I could just talk about this passage where is it Naaman that comes to get healed from Elisha? He comes from Syria. He gets told to go dunk in the Jordan River. And then Gehazi runs after him and says, hey, man, actually, my master changed his mind. We do want some of that money. And then Elisha specifically says, my spirit went with you. Are you saying like, no, that's not something that can happen?
And
Okay,
if your
so that-
spirit
okay, so
goes
this
somewhere,
is-
is that not a
this is
spiritual
the-
realm?
This is okay. This is an important distinction. That doesn't mean there's a realm. Okay, so let's go back to the DMT thing, because this is a good example. So when somebody's tripping on psilocybin or ayahuasca, they're there, their body's there, just like a person, just like a prophet who's having a trance, right? Just like you when you're dreaming and you're in deep REM sleep, having very, very similar experiences when you have profound dreams. There's really no difference between a profound dream and somebody tripping on DMT. Now, I would say there are some differences, but the experiences are very, very similar. This is like a dreamscape. So obviously, these are perceptual experiences. The person hasn't gone anywhere. The person hasn't gone anywhere. And to say that their spirit departed and went into some like different realm is an extrapolation that.
So you might say
that
spirit
I think
scape.
is, huh?
You might say spirit scape instead.
No, I don't think that. I think it's a perceptual world. Does your spirit go somewhere when you dream? Does it go to like the dream world? Does it go to the dream world when you're dreaming?
I would say that, for lack of a better vocabulary to apply to the situation, that's an apt way to describe it.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I think
Okay,
there
so-
are varying levels of it. Yeah.
Okay, so well, first of all, we know that dreams are a product of the brain. We know that. We can induce dreams. We can interrupt dreams. Dreams are a product of the brain. You have different kinds of dreams based on different things that are going on in your body, chemically speaking. The same thing applies to DMT. The same thing applies to psychedelics. Something is happening in the brain. This is a perceptual world. Now, I will agree that within this perceptual experience, dreams are like this too, but especially through DMT, you can make contact with other non-human intelligences in this perceptual environment. But I like to think of it as an internet of consciousness. So just like you and I, we're talking, we're not in the same room. You guys aren't sitting here in my room. I'm not sitting there, and you're not here in my office. I'm not there in your studio. But yet here we are interacting. You can hear me and you can see me. So we're having this very interesting interchange, even though we're not physically in the same place. And we understand that this is happening because of technology, basically, fundamentally because of electricity, right? That's the agency through which we are able to do this, is electricity. Well, in the same way, when people are under the influence of narcotics, especially psychedelics, prominently, especially psychedelics, let's put it in those terms. Although this happens when people are, sometimes you can have a lucid vision where you're not under the influence of anything, right? So that's why there's a caveat there. But when that's happening,
fasting comes to mind.
Yeah, you can have a lucid, or if you're, by the way, near-death experience, or if you're dying of thirst, or if you're completely dehydrated, you start to hallucinate. So you can have these perceptual experiences, and when you're in this perceptual mode, just like we're communicating over the internet, and I'm going to say again, especially through the agency of psychedelics, I think you can plug into something. Your brain connects to something, and it's what I like to call an internet of consciousness, to where other beings are also plugged into this internet of consciousness. And just like we're each plugged into the internet, we can communicate. Well, when you plug your psyche into the internet of consciousness, you then become open to communication from other intelligences that are there. And that's not a realm. This isn't a realm. Would you guys say that there's a realm of the internet? Is it a realm?
That's hard to define. I mean, maybe a better question would be, if it happens exclusively in your brain, then how are people having meaningful near-death experiences when they're declared brain dead?
Because it's not exclusive to the brain. There's a mechanism in the brain, but the consciousness is outside of the brain. So
where is it?
Nobody really understands the way it works.
It's like your spirit.
Consciousness is connected to the body in some way. And the near-death experiences, which is a different topic, but near-death experiences are variegated. They vary wildly based on a person's cultural background, based on their own religious, theological perspectives. You know, if you're a Catholic, I talked to a guy that was dead, clinically dead, got blown up in I think it was Iraq. And he was a Catholic, and he had a very Catholic experience where he saw, like, I forget the name of the statue, where Mary is holding Jesus. That's famous carving where Mary's holding Jesus in her arms. And he had an experience, very, very Catholic experience, in which he was dead, and there he is seeing Mary holding Jesus. And then suddenly he realizes it's him. Mary's holding him. And all the iconography of this experience was as I said, was Catholic, was very, very Catholic, because he was a Catholic. People have all kinds of experiences, near-death experiences, which tells me that these are perceptual experiences based on the person's own cultural background, theological disposition. Sometimes you have an atheist who have a near-death experience, and it's like hell, right? Demons and hell and all this kind of stuff. Well, maybe that person was subconsciously really worried that maybe hell did exist or whatever. You know what I mean? So there's no, like, near-death experiences. They're so variegated. Yes, there's some commonalities that people most of the time have a good experience, and this includes, by the way, atheists. Most of the time have a good experience, have like they see a light, or they're confronted with, or they're met by their loved ones, or some wonderful communication. They receive some wonderful communication from a disembodied voice, or they're in this beautiful place. I mean, and then you have the hellscapes, and then you have everything in between. So I wouldn't use near-death experience to try and bolster the idea that there's a spiritual realm. So do I believe, let's change the definition here, okay? Let's not talk about a spiritual realm, because if you're going to invoke a spiritual realm, you have to tell me, first of all, what makes a spiritual realm different than a physical realm? So answer that question first. What's the difference? Let me grant that there's a spiritual realm.
At the 50-minute mark, I don't think we should risk getting in the weeds of the intangible nature of the spirit any longer. The nature of this.
This is great, though. I mean,
no, it's fantastic, but I recognize that we're dealing with an intangible thing here. I think it's wise to move on to the more nuts and bolts aspect of what we actually came to talk about, which is this thing that we're on the cusp of. Now, the show is called Are Aliens Demons? This is a cheeky way of getting into a larger conversation. The larger conversation surrounds specifically disclosure. That is the thing that I find most fascinating about the things that you have to say in this conversation, this greater conversation about aliens. Now, the way that I want to set this up, and this isn't accusatory, this is more asking for clarification. We watched your series on this show, True Legends. It's a fantastic documentary. The True Legends, what's the sub there?
The Technology of the Fallen.
The Technology of the Fallen. It was actually the second one in particular that stood out to me. It was about the Vatican. And throughout that documentary, you, Tom Horn, and Steve Quayle do a fantastic job of laying out not only the compelling evidence for giants having created megalithic structures and technology being utilized to create megalithic structures, you know, given the fitment of the stones, etc. But one of the things that really stuck out was when you were talking about the Vatican and the role that it was going to play in a coming disclosure deception. We talked about, or you talked about on that documentary, how the Pope was alluding to baptizing space brethren, et cetera, et cetera. It was either Tom Quayle or Steve Quayle or Tom Horn who said that it was the Great Deception. That was the language that they used. The Great Deception. And one of the things that you personally said was that you were concerned that the Antichrist was going to emerge from this deception. Now, where we sit is basically on the cusp of the very thing that you warned about 10 years ago. We're sitting here where I would call this and it's cheeky, right? And it's maybe a caricaturization of what this documentary was, but the Age of Disclosure feels, for all intents and purposes, like a government-funded disclosure operation. Now, a lot of people have been waiting for alien disclosure, yourself included, myself included, for 20, 30 years, as far back as this phenomenon has been taking place. What is strange to me is now we can get lost in the weeds about, well, what is a demon? Is this demonic? Is this phenomenon, in opposition to God, etc.? But if you believe that the Antichrist is going to emerge, which I agree with, and I thought your research on the matter was very compelling, and it is in alignment with our research, along with countless other people in the space. It's not like our thoughts are original. It's
kind of like you've actually formed an argument that has now come to argue with you. It's like time travel.
Yeah, it's like time travel. And so there is.
Have you read Birthright?
Yes, yes. So there is a time in your studies where you suspect the Antichrist is going to come from this disclosure. As far as I'm concerned, Tim, it looks to me like Age of Disclosure is the biggest step in that direction. And it is filled with a bunch of people who have worked in the intelligence community. And I'm not saying that automatically makes them discredited. In fact, I don't even necessarily think that's what's happening. I don't think that they're feds. I see you saying that a lot online, a lot of people accusing Luis Elizondo of getting the call, is what you said. Did he get the call? Did he get the call?
I wasn't referring to Luis Elizondo in that way. I was referring to myself. People accused me of having gotten the call.
I was actually looking at your Twitter just the other day. It was a flippant thing that you said to somebody, but somebody was criticizing Elizondo, and you said jokingly, "Oh, do you think that he got the call?"
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
Which is a fair criticism, right? Because that doesn't mean anything. Got the call from who? Are we talking about the Jews, Israel, the Vatican? What are we talking about? That's fine. But to put it in the words of either Steve Quayle or Tom Horn, this is the Great Deception. And I find that it is a higher likelihood that the people that are involved in, parading this thing around are themselves deceived, are meaning well, just like the people that you say, using the language of demons or demonic to describe this phenomenon, mean well, but are misguided. I think a lot of these people that are in this space mean well, but are misguided. So what happened in this time? What sort of information did you gather that doesn't make you, a guy who's been in this space for a long time, sound the alarm? Sound the alarm, because to me, it looks like the enemy is almost on the horizon. This great deception that leads to the Antichrist is at our doorstep, closer than it's ever been, surely. And it's got more eyes on it than ever. And the narrative is being rolled out and formed. And it's also being packaged in a way where everybody has their talking points. What are your talking points? I'm in the military for 28 years. I saw these things. I've been in the Air Force for 30 years. I saw these things. I've been in the Navy for X amount of years. I saw these things. And we're getting our talking point. We're getting our repetition. It's beyond me or anybody that listens to this show to trust the experts. And I know that you say that's an ironic place to be, because if the government did come out and tell us the truth, we simply wouldn't be able to believe them because of the distrust that we have for them. So yeah, maybe that's a discussion to have. But where is this? I imagine if I was a guy that truly was convicted in this idea that the Antichrist would come from this system, I would be sounding the alarm. What is it that you were introduced to that changed that tone?
What would you be sounding the alarm about?
I would sound the alarm about the nature of listening to experts talk about disclosure, experts like, let's say, the Vatican, for example, and that you should have a very healthy distrust for anything that presents itself as this alien phenomenon, and that really your eyes and your heart should be focused on Jesus Christ.
Okay, but let's talk about the nature of the deception that you're referencing. First of all, my thoughts on this topic specifically, I don't believe I would disagree with anything I said in those films. That was a long time ago. And I have evolved my perception has evolved, my perspective rather, on certain topics, but all of that is laid out in Birthright. That's why I asked you if you read Birthright, because in Birthright, I talk about precisely what you're referencing, that the Antichrist, I believe, is going to come and be received. He's going to come, I believe, at the helm of an aerospace vehicle and will be received as an extraterrestrial savior. And that he will be received by Christians as the second coming of Christ. He's going to be an imposter. He'll be received by every major world religion as their Christ figure. And he's going to deliver us, in my estimation, and this is just a theory, from the gray alien threat. That's what I write in Birthright.
Mm-hmm.
And, or perhaps or some kind of a cataclysmic event, you know, an asteroid or something like that. And so that, the deception that I talk about in regard to this topic is the presentation of this imposter, this person who is claiming to be Christ, but who is, from my perspective, the seed of Satan, the offspring, the son of Satan, who will present himself to the world as our savior. Yes, I believe that the Vatican is quietly, especially the Jesuits, quietly crafting quietly building the theological substrate, the foundation to receive our alien saviors. And I believe that those alien saviors, in contrast to gray aliens, which of course are ugly little exotic beings, the saviors that the world will receive with open arms are going to look like us, are going to look like what in ufology are called the Pleiadians or the Nordics. And this makes a lot of sense to me. So none of that has changed. My perspective on none of that has changed. So
just to clarify, because I got lost a little bit there, you're saying that you expect this savior that will be Antichrist or the Antichrist to come from this camp, this tall Nords, this Pleiadians, and that they're going to defeat this threat that is the gray aliens. Is that what you said there?
I suspect that that's true. I don't know that that's true for sure. I suspect that something like that is going to play out. Nobody knows exactly where all of this is headed, except to say that it's headed to Armageddon. Ultimately, this culminates in war with God. That's the culmination of the book Birthright, and surely that's where all of this is headed. Now let's be this. We have to get into the particulars. So I framed what I believe the deception is. The deception clearly, and by the way, the great deception is precisely that. It's going to revolve around this person that shows up in the world, and I don't think it's just going to be a political figure, who presents himself as the Son of God, as the Christ. But he will be anti-Christ, and he will be in opposition to Christ and to his people. That's the deception. That's the great deception. And people will follow him. So this all hinges on, the deception itself hinges on Jesus's words to his question, the most important question posed in the Bible, cover to cover. This is unquestionably the most important question posed. And it's Jesus talking to his disciples. And he says, "Who do men say that I am?" And they say, "Well, some say you're Elijah, some say you're the prophet." But Jesus asks them, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter says, "You are the Messiah, the Son of God." And then Jesus said, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood have not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven." And then he says, "On this rock I will build my church." And of course, the rock that he's talking about is the revelation of who he is. That's the rock that the church is built on. So what is the lie? What is the deception? It's the antithesis of that. The deception is an imposter who comes in the name of Christ, who presents himself as the Savior, the Son of God. And of course, his God is the dragon. Okay. So what you're going to have is you're going to have an inversion of the gospel. It's Luciferianism. It's the lie. It's the Luciferian lie that Yahweh was a tyrant who enslaved mankind, and that it was actually this figure we call Lucifer, which is actually a misnomer from the Vulgate, this being that the Bible defines as the devil and Satan, who was in Eden, the Garden of God with Eve, that being will be presented as the real benefactor of mankind. This is the Promethean benefactor of mankind. This is the good guy. He's pro-humanity. He enlightens us. He breaks the shackles of Yahweh and liberates mankind. That's the lie. His son, I believe his hybrid son, will be presented in the place of Christ. That's what Antichrist means, by the way. In the place of Christ. That's the lie. That's the deception. And I've always maintained that, and I maintain that to this day. Now back up, and let's kind of reverse engineer your thoughts here. So you have to define what you believe specifically is the deception, because if you are here to say that the deception is crash retrievals and gray aliens, I'm going to disagree with you.
I never claimed that it was the Great Deception. I said that Tom Horn or Steve Quayle said that, but I think that you've laid that out really well. And from this position, we can ask a couple of follow-up questions. Now, I would say that I agree that Gnostic view, Yaldabaoth, the demiurge being the, imprisoner of the planet and all this other stuff and rebellion, I can see that is the way that this is more than likely going to unfold. But what I'm curious about is I watch you in many cases push back against anybody who will say something like aliens are demons or aliens are demonic. But from what you just described, from the Pleiadians will likely emerge this Antichrist savior figure after they destroy the Greys. Where in this body of ETs or NHIs or any of the rebranding that we've given them recently, is there something worthy of giving pause to that statement being this is demonic or these are demons? Couldn't it be said that if you dismiss the aliens as of that ilk, then you're pretty well safe?
Safe from what? I mean, acknowledging
a large scale
reality,
deception.
Acknowledging reality doesn't open you up to deception. So whether or not you're going to fall for the deception, the great deception, is going to depend on how deep your roots go in the gospel of Christ. And if you are loyal to the King of Heaven or disloyal, that's what the deception is going to hinge on. It's not going to be you're not going to be tricked into anything. It's going to be a test of loyalty. And so I'm not worried about being deceived. And I'm not worried about
you're
Christians
not worried about
deceived.
being perceived, but your occupation is such that you have this is what you do. You have the time and you can exert the effort into looking into all of the greater details and nuances of this phenomenon. The average person doesn't have that. The average person is working at 9 to 5. The world will be subjected to this large deception. If the Antichrist is going to come from the Pleiadians, if the Greys are going to be defeated and they're going to look like heroes, perhaps it is better for the average person to just look at the entire phenomenon and go, this is not of God. This is demonic. This is a distraction from my walk with Jesus Christ. And therefore, I'm going to focus on that instead of whatever's happening here. And I'm going to reject that. So when the Pleiadians do come down to this person who is not equipped, who really could be, I wonder, your body of knowledge is representative of what percentage of the population? Meaning, who else has access to?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. All you have to be knowledgeable of is the gospel of Christ.
Exactly.
So
if you were to say, I love Christ and these things are demons, what is even the sense in pushing back against that?
Well, because first of all, there's no advantage to believing fantasies. We have to get very specific here. So people say this is all a deception. And that doesn't mean anything. That's such an ambiguous phrase. It literally means nothing. What precisely is the deception? So let's be specific here. We have these whistleblowers, including Lou Elizondo, David Grush, and the others who've come forward, and what they're saying, this is what they're saying uniformly. What they're saying is that there is an illegal legacy crash retrieval program in which elements of the United States government, the military industrial complex, with aerospace contractors, private contracting companies, have been and are actively recovering advanced aerospace craft of non-human design, and in association with these craft, the pilots, non-human biological pilots who crash and die. And that this technology has been sequestered into these aerospace companies and illegally hidden from oversight from Congress. So there's no oversight. The program is real, and there is no oversight by Congress and therefore by extension the American people, and that to some extent the situation is out of control, and that elements of this cover up are now rogue. Okay, that's what these guys are saying. That's what they're saying. So tell me, they're not saying that, hey, these are our saviors. They're not saying that the aliens are our gods. They're not saying that the Bible is false. They're not out, there's no messaging involved here. All these guys are saying, the ones that have raised their hand and under oath have testified to Congress, all they're saying are the things that I just laid out. So now tell me, I don't care about their backgrounds. I don't care about fake photos and things like this. Let's just focus on what they're saying. What is the deception here? What's the disinformation? What's the deception? Where's the misdirect here?
It's actually very subtle. So if you're creating a documentary, let's say in the case of Age of Disclosure, and you're exploring this phenomenon with no consideration, and especially none given to the general public who's viewing it, of the supernatural, of Jesus Christ, of God, of angels, of any of these things, if you're not exploring that, that's one thing. But then to go a measure further and make it so that the only mention of, let's say, Christianity or Jesus is an allusion made to the fact that there's an old guard within the Pentagon who has stopped progress on this very important topic because of their superstitious beliefs and them labeling it demonic. So the only thing that you've done is make a gigantic film that hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people will see, and the only mention that you saw fit to inject of something Christ adjacent was a dismissal of the notion. And in fact, saying that anybody who did express that notion stood in the way of progress. Something that I've actually heard you say on your review of Age of Disclosure. You echoed those exact same sentiments. You said that those people who said demonic and demons were misguided, which is the exact same thing that was said on that, maybe a little bit more gracious because misguided is nice. On that documentary, they just said those people stood in the way of progress. So what you've done now is, to the average person who's not well researched, who doesn't have the analytical mind, who doesn't even have the time, let's be honest, 9 to 5s and all that, you've subliminally planted a little seed in their head. And that is, religious people have stood in the way of progress because of things like labeling this demonic or of the devil, which means that anytime they hear that in the future, they're going to scoff and recoil at that. And let's be honest, what this leads to, according to the New Age and a multitude of other things, including the Bible, is a falling away and a consolidation of the religions, one world religion under this new umbrella. So you have to actually get Christianity out of the way. So it's not unremarkable or insignificant that in this gigantic documentary, the only thing they saw fit to do was dismiss it in the most flippant ways.
They're not Christians. A lot of these guys aren't Christians. They're
that's
not
a mistake
approaching
to explore this phenomenon without Christianity, without being rooted in Jesus Christ, as we just said, rooted in the gospel. Rooted in the gospel is what you said, right? And so the biggest mouthpiece on this phenomenon are not rooted in the Bible.
Well, some of them aren't Christians. So this isn't a theological documentary. They're not coming at this topic from a theological perspective. They're coming at this topic, which is a fundamental mistake. Not necessarily. They're coming at this topic from just a nuts and bolts perspective. This is what we know to be true. This is what we can testify as what we would describe as a set of facts. And we believe that these beings are real, they're non-human, and at some level they represent a national security threat. That's how I would summarize that film. Now,
can I pose to you a simple question then? if being rooted in the gospel is the most important aspect of this entire thing, how is it absent from this discussion?
Who cares what they say? This is the job of people like me and like you guys who remind believers that they need to be rooted in the gospel of Christ, that's the anchor. But I'm not going to deny.
Have you done that
reality.
though on your shows on the Daily Wire? I mean, this is kind of
many times. Yes, many times. I say this all the time. But we have to acknowledge the reality, the facts. Okay, there is a crash retrieval program. They are recovering non-human technology and non-human bodies. There's nothing deceptive about that, except for the fact that elements of the military-industrial complex are trying to hide that from the American people. Now, if you have, by the way, there's opposing Christian factions here. Okay, so this is much more complex than you think. There's a faction of Christians inside of government, and I would describe them as evangelical Christians, who are opposed to telling the American people anything about this phenomenon.
Are you alluding to the Collins elite?
The so-called Collins elite. I don't know if they would consider themselves that, or how well organized they are. This faction exists. Again, I don't know how well organized they are, but they're there. They're evangelical Christians. And then you have another faction of Christians who want to tell the American people the truth and who are trying to get to the bottom of this thing and bring these programs back under the jurisdiction, the control of Congress, the oversight of Congress. Okay, because a lot of what's being done is, I will use the word demonic, and is contrary to the Constitution and so forth. So there's believers on both sides of this thing. It's not over here the Christians are telling us it's demons, and everybody who's saying no, we need to tell the truth about this phenomenon. We need to tell the American people what's going on, that those are just atheistic people who are not coming at this from a Christian perspective. That's simply not true. In fact, the congressmen who are most active in this arena, and by the way, their main goal is to do two things: to tell the American people the truth, as much of the truth as they can without compromising national security, and then to bring these illegal programs back under the control of the American people, of Congress, and also of the executive branch. Because the things that are happening in these programs, some of the things that have been happening in these programs are evil. I mean, you're talking about experimentation on human beings. You're talking about this advanced technology falling into the hands of extremely nefarious groups who are using it to do terrible things. And so there's a lot of crime that's being covered up. There's the most terrible things imaginable have been done in the service of acquiring, reverse engineering this technology and keeping it secret from the American people. I mean, the elements of the government and these aerospace contractors have murdered people to keep this thing secret. See, that's what I would call evil. That's nefarious. Okay. And the people that I work with are at the governmental level are believers, are Christians, many of them, most of them. And they want to bring this, this monster, this octopus that's grown in darkness under the cover of these unacknowledged special access programs that have been developed in the underground, the deep underground military bases outside of the jurisdiction of the executive branch and Congress. That's what they want to remedy. Okay. And I applaud that effort. That's a noble effort. And I think that hiding the truth from people, hiding the truth from the American people, I don't think there's anything righteous or just or noble about that. I'm completely opposed to that. So the fact that we have crash retrievals, that we have alien bodies, and I use the word alien very intentionally because they're not us. They're not us. Okay, these bodies. And as I defined earlier, demons are the disembodied spirits of dead giants, of Nephilim. Okay, they're disembodied. These are physical, biological beings who crash and die. So Are they demonic? Well, that's a different question. Demonic simply means nefarious, fiendish, maniacal, and so forth. Are they demonic? Well, then you'd have to, let's define who we're talking about. If we're talking about gray aliens, I believe personally that gray aliens are demonic, but I would never concede that they are demons. Those are two different ideas, setting aside the Western perception of demons and just constraining ourselves to the Hebraic cosmological perspective of demons. No, they're not. They're clearly not demons, but what they're doing is nefarious because of the abduction program and the breeding program and the generation of advanced human alien hybrids. I think that their goal is what Dr. David Jacobs describes as planetary acquisition. So are they demonic? Yes. Do they constitute a national security threat? Unequivocally.
Do you agree with the idea that they're into planetary acquisition?
What's that?
Are you subscribed to the idea that they are after planetary acquisition?
Grays?
Yes.
Gray aliens? Yes, absolutely.
Something I want to ask you is, you've done a lot, documentaries, podcasts, books, etc. I've only got a small view into, another platform you have access to right now, which is Twitter. And I was curious as you were talking, this idea of being grounded in the gospel, I think is incredibly important. I think you're right over the target when you say that being grounded in the gospel is what is going to get you through this. And so I thought surely there must be mention of the gospel. You must have taken to your X to talk about the gospel within the context of being grounded in it in order to not be deceived or to understand or, get through this period and be in alignment with God and stay on this narrow path and have salvation through Christ and not be, twisted up in this entire multifaceted thing that we've got here. I got to admit, I'm looking at this and you've got one mention of extraterrestrial life in the same breath as the gospel of Christ. And all it is to say the curiosity of the existence of the extraterrestrial life does not detract from the gospel of Christ. Now that's fine. You've got a lot of different platforms where you are doing this thing. What gets me is if I type in the word demonic, gray, or demons into your Twitter and do a keyword search, you have spent a lot of time, especially in stark comparison to what I've just laid out here, knocking people off of this position. And it's just strange to me because
gray aliens aren't demons.
No, and I know that.
Well, what are gray aliens?
Great, and we're not going to agree on this. We've gone back and forth in this. I'm actually not interested in hashing that out as much as to say on this show that I believe that there's a high likelihood they're a biomechanical husk that is basically an automaton meant to carry out tasks in a physical realm where these things otherwise would not be able to engage with us physically. And so it's a limited form of technology that they can interface with. I know we've hashed this out on a previous show. You said, and that comes predominantly from Karen Wilkinson. She's got a firsthand experience with these things, and her testimony has contributed significantly.
Right, but was she sleeping?
Well, I mean, she wouldn't maintain that she was sleeping, considering there was a pregnancy and hybrid.
No. You're talking about alien abduction. No, alien abduction.
Right. But that's a separate thing. I don't want to go off on that. I don't want to go off on that tangent. I want to say it is strange to me, and there's a multitude of ways you can defend it, and maybe it's my own bias that you would spend all this time fighting people down off the hill that these things are demons or demonic, but very, very, very little to no mention on your own Twitter of the gospel of Christ being what you need to be grounded in. As a matter of fact, that's not what you say at all on your Twitter. I got to ask you.
I'm sorry, but that's disingenuous.
I'm doing a keyword search right now.
Who cares about what I say on Twitter? I spend a great deal of time. That's what I said,
and you have a multitude of ways
in my publications, in interviews with people, on my YouTube channel.
You would imagine, though, it is important what you say on your Twitter, right? I mean, if you're going to go as far as to tell people it's not demons or it's not demonic.
Well, it's not demons. Why would I contradict myself? It's not demons.
That's a fair question. I would say, why wouldn't you spend time telling people to be grounded in the gospel of Christ in order to not be whipped up in this deception?
Well, because oftentimes what I'm responding to are people who are attempting to say that the whole thing is a deception, that what the whistleblowers are saying, that's all just a deception, which is absurd. And it's not true. what the whistleblowers are saying is true, and we should be applauding their efforts to expose these illegal programs and to bring these programs back under the jurisdiction of the government, back under the jurisdiction of Congress and the executive branch specifically. That's a noble enterprise. These guys know that very grave crimes, very grievous crimes have been committed under the shadow of darkness, because these programs are out of sight, out of mind. Literally, some of them are being developed miles beneath the surface of the earth in these deep underground military bases. The most heinous things have been done, okay? Children have been taken forcefully and inducted into these programs for various things, for various reasons. And this gets really dark, by the way. And so these guys are coming forward saying, you've been lied to. This program exists. It's existed for a long time. We're reverse engineering technology and have been, and there's no oversight. Okay? Now, that is a noble endeavor. And so I defend that endeavor, and I defend the congressmen and women who are working to get oversight over this situation and to inform the American people of the truth. Okay? That is a noble enterprise. And so when people look at that and say, it's all just demonic and a deception, that's disingenuous and it's ignorant and it's not true. There's nothing deceptive about the declaration that we have a reverse engineering program, a legacy program that goes back decades. We have been recovering and attempting to reverse engineer non-human technology and have been studying the bodies. That's where this thing begins, okay? But the rabbit hole goes deep and it's dark. And people like Lou Elizondo, I know Lou, Lou's a friend of mine. People like Lou and others would acknowledge immediately. Now, they don't say this publicly because they're not theological people. They don't do what I do, but privately they will tell you that this is demonic, that it's nefarious, that it's fiendish, that it's maniacal. This is demonic, much of it. Not all of it, much of it. And I say not all of it because, as I said in the beginning, that's why I went through what I did in the beginning of this conversation. You know, we have to differentiate between the bad guys and the good guys. And the good guys being the angels. The good guys being the loyal sons of God who use the same kind of technology.
Where do you see them in this mix-up? Do you have any examples? And I know this is speculation, or it's once again the intangible, but where in the alien phenomenon would you point to as a likelihood for the good side of things?
Well, I mean, that's, one can only speculate, but I have a good friend of mine named Gary Sterman, who maybe you guys are familiar with Gary Sterman over at Prophecy Watchers. Gary's a Bible teacher, very good friend of mine. And Gary had an encounter when he was a young man. He was flying a Cessna, and he was delivering this Cessna to, I think he was flying from, I believe he was flying from Lubbock to Dallas, I think is what the route was. And without going to all the details, he had an encounter he had a malfunction in his airplane, and he lost the electronics went out on him, and he was in some serious trouble. And again, without going into all the details, he had an encounter with a craft that appeared, a walnut-shaped craft that appeared and on the horizon, and then suddenly it was flying parallel to his aircraft. And these beings were emanating, they communicated with him in his cabin, and it was kind of a humorous communication. And long story short, they saved his life and delivered him to the airport. He landed his plane, and from that experience, it was because of that experience that he decided to become a Bible teacher and a pastor. That was the catalyst that caused that to happen. And he will tell you, to this day, he believes that those were angels who saved his life. Now, I believe that angels use this advanced technology, that this technology comes from an angelic civilization, which we call the kingdom of heaven, that these beings use and wield technology, as I said in the beginning. So just because you see some advanced technology and non-human beings in play doesn't necessarily mean that the beings are nefarious. Technology has no allegiance. a UFO can be no more evil than your truck, than your Ford truck. Okay, it's the beings that are piloting the craft, and we can determine if they're nefarious based on their actions, and if they're counter to the gospel of Christ based on their messages. That's it. So I don't look at like the UFO phenomenon as demonic. No, it's just technology. I'm interested in what the beings who pilot these craft are doing and are saying. That's what's important to me. That's how you determine whether or not these things are good or bad.
Even that wouldn't be necessarily a great I mean, it's what we have. We're limited in our ability to assess these things. But even in the context of the Pleiadians who would save us from grays, that would surely seem like a good deed. And many people would be deceived by that.
Until their leader claims to be Christ and directs worship to the enemy of God, to the dragon. Yeah. I mean,
surely there would be a number of things short of claiming to be Christ that could happen before we even get to that point.
So what? Are angels real?
For example, when people get abducted, there's often an entire array of entities. So the grays will be there, the Pleiadians or the tall whites will be there, insectoids and things of that nature. But oftentimes the Pleiadians will be soothing and will come off as loving. And they actually seem to have maybe technology or a psychic ability to generate within us a feeling of love and happiness and content.
Jake Barber comes to mind.
Which is Jake Barber's another one, who was filled with this divine feminine spirit that seemed to be love, all-encompassing love, while he's doing this UAP egg retrieval situation. And so I would say our assessment, emotional or otherwise, on this matter is not enough. In fact, the Bible calls us to test the spirits, although you don't necessarily believe that this is spiritual. You believe that these are
that's
physical
not what it
entities.
means. It doesn't mean test the spirits like because they're wraiths, they're disembodied wraiths. It means test what's being said, test the message that's being delivered. That's what you test. I mean, you don't. It's not like Ghostbusters where you have some sort of a meter that tests to see if there's evil spirits around. It's the messaging that you have to evaluate based on the truth of the gospel of Christ. That's what test the spirits means. And in fact, the New Testament is specific that it's a question of allegiance. Do you believe that did Jesus Christ come in the flesh? Did he die on the cross?
Right.
Did he rise? Is Jesus who he claims to be? That's the test. Not whether or not, they're flying around on saucers or whatever, or making people feel good. Who cares about any of that? That's inconsequential to me, totally inconsequential. Yes, it's true that just because beings look beautiful and present themselves, this is Satan presenting himself as an angel of light, as a messenger of light and truth and goodness. Sure, of course that happens. That's deception. And it happens during abductions. Now, it is not actually uncommon. I mean, rather, it is not common for abductees to encounter Nordics, the Pleiadians, during abduction episodes. It's actually uncommon. It does happen sometimes, but it's actually quite uncommon. Usually abductees only encounter the grays and the insectolins, and the grays are most prominent. And you have to understand, if you're going to wade into the realm of alien abduction, abductees are physically abducted. They're physically on alien vessels. They're not having a DMT experience. It's not sleep paralysis. It's not a near-death experience. They're literally taken and from their bed, say, and then they find themselves laying on a table on an alien craft, naked, sometimes with a lot of other abductees. And the gray aliens, the beings that we call the grays with the large bulbous heads and the almond-shaped eyes, who are usually diminutive in stature, those are the worker bees of this program. They're probably, like you, I would agree with your assessment of the grays, that there's some sort of a biomechanical, some sort of a biomechanical construct, although they do seem to have their own personality. So I wouldn't say that they're just artificial intelligence or something like that. Most likely they're cybernetic clones, I think is the way I would describe them. and they're not in charge of the operation. The creatures that are in charge of the operation are altogether more exotic than the Greys. Those are the insectolins. They are clearly the managers of the abduction program. Now, whether or not the Pleiadians are involved, or if what people are seeing are human alien hybrids, who knows? I don't know. I mean, I do suspect that on some level,
Well,
the
technically,
Nordics
we
are
don't know
involved.
any of this, right? To say that it rarely happens or it happens often that
Oh,
the
no, we know.
Pleiadians are present.
Oh no,
How do
we
you
know.
know?
There's
We
a
actually,
voluminous data on alien abduction. Voluminous. It's scientific, and it's conclusive. We know.
well, it's hard to
There's
say
no
it's
question
scientifically
about.
conclusive when only so many years ago it was basically taboo and the laughing stock of the scientific community.
Well, what are
So,
you referencing here? Have you familiarized yourself with the material?
yeah, actually, I was actually speaking to Karen Wilkinson recently, who has a plethora of these
Okay,
experiences.
but that's one
where,
person. I mean, there's a lot of
well, like
material
you
that has
said,
been
there is
accrued over
a
decades.
huge voluminous body of abductee victims out there who
Yeah,
are sharing all these experiences.
Conclusive data related to the abduction phenomenon. Like, we know what
How does
alien
one
abduction
achieve
is.
conclusive data in
Is
this
conclusive
phenomenon?
data like government approved data?
Yeah,
Is
I
that
don't
what we're
care about
talking about
government
here?
approved data. I'm talking about data that
you do.
corresponds to reality as it pertains to the phenomenon and the testimony of millions of abductees. So the data comes from competent abduction researchers, especially those of the past. You know, a lot of this began with Dr. John Mack, whose conclusions I disagree with. He was approaching this whole thing from a psychological perspective, but he kind of laid a foundation for abduction research, and he did some good work. But then you have people like Bud Hopkins, who was an excellent abduction researcher. You had Dr. Carla Turner, who was herself an abductee, and her family did phenomenal research into the topic. And then, of course, Dr. David Jacobs, among others. And the data is conclusive. And when you take the body of data, and by the way, I talk to abductees all the time who come to me, most of whom are Christians, by the way, who come to me, and all of their experiences are consistent. What everything I'm told is completely consistent with the data. Now, the abduction is a field of ufology. This is the field where you have the most evidence by far. Abductees are physically missing when they're abducted. Their family members are sometimes frantically are looking for them. Police have been called. Search teams have been dispatched to try and find these people. So abductees are physically missing from the point of abduction when they go up on it. What's that?
But not every time. Some people have all of the exact same experiences, but never actually seem to have left their physical
Then that's not an
surroundings.
alien abduction. That's not an
So
abduction.
it has all the exact same elements.
Well,
Minus,
who cares? You could have a dream about alien abduction and never have been abducted.
well, if you don't believe in the spiritual realm, then yeah, who cares?
No. Look, alien abduction is not a spiritual experience. It's a physical experience. Women are abducted, for example. They're laid out on the tables. They have all kinds of gynecological procedures done. Their eggs are extracted. There's some sort of exotic component added to the egg in vitro. Then that hybrid zygote is implanted into their womb. Even if the woman doesn't have a womb, there's an extrauteral implantation. Then the women are brought back, and the fetus develops in their womb. And they're reabducted before they start to show, sometime around the 3-month period or before the 3-month period. They're taken back onto the ship. Now the fetus is extracted and put into a gestation tank to complete its development. This is how women in the abduction program are used continually. And it doesn't even matter if the woman can't have babies and if she can't get pregnant, the Greys can still impregnate her. She still carries the fetus, and it's still extracted before she shows. Sometimes women are abducted and they have fetuses implanted, or rather zygotes implanted. Fetuses grow in their wombs. These women are virgins. They've never had sex. And they go to their gynecologist, and the gynecologist says, well, you're pregnant. And they don't believe them. They think that they're lying, that they didn't have sexual intercourse. And then the women sometimes contemplate an abortion, and the Greys know. They come, they reabduct her, and they extract the fetus. This happens routinely. Men are abducted, and their sperm is taken. And it's not just that eggs are taken from them and a sperm is taken from them. There's all kinds of things that happen. Men and women are made to have sexual intercourse on board the craft. Often, this is why so many abductees don't come forward with their stories, because you can imagine if you're married, happily married, and you're holding this secret that you know you had sex with another woman on a alien vessel, although it was not intentional, although it was against your will, that's a very sensitive topic. And besides that, abductees are implanted with screen memories. Very few abductees have conscious recall of the events of the abduction episode. Rather, when they try to remember, they're presented with false memories called screen memories, which are implanted into their brains during the abduction episode. And this is what abduction researchers refer to as mind scanned, or Dr. Jacobs calls it neural engagement, in which the Greys or the insectolins put their face, like basically touching the abductee's face, and they look into their eyes and they implant memories, and they conceal the real memories of the event behind a firewall
So
of screen memories.
this feels very similar to the sons of God coming into the daughters of man, making a hybridization program. But if you are looking at the events in the Bible as symbolic and not actually a physical event that takes place, nobody's actually seeing angels, nobody's having these things. Let's frame it in the way that we talked about at the top of the show when we're talking about angelic beings and things of that nature. And then this is exclusively a physical phenomenon.
Well, so was that.
I can see why there is basically a disagreement between us, because I would say that these things, both in the biblical sense and in the modern day alien abduction sense, are spiritual and are physical and are reiterations. This is a repackaging of the same thing that happened all those ages ago.
With all due respect, you just said nothing. Our physical, our spiritual.
Kind of a lot of what you did here.
I mean, no, listen. So the Watchers descending to the earth and copulating with human women, that's all physical. That's not some spiritual thing. That's a physical thing. By the way, the first cause of the Watchers' sin, of the Watchers' rebellion, was lust, according to the book of Enoch, and also Genesis 6. They lusted after the daughters of men. That's a physical impulse. Now, how do you explain lust without the biological equipment? I mean, how does an ethereal spiritual being lust after a physical woman? They lusted, and then they descended to the earth. They took wives and they copulated. They had sexual intercourse with these women. I'm not saying that this is spiritual or symbolic. That's a matter of history. It was a matter of history to the Jews. Within the historical narrative of the ancient Hebrews, that was a historical fact that happened. I would never say that was symbolic. Absolutely not. That's not something that happened within the context of a perceptual experience of a dream or trance. That's something that
then
actually
let me pose
happened.
a question to get us back on track.
Would that also be historical fact across like mythologies, pantheons, Greek culture, things like that? But then they're also creating
demigods,
like, weird demigod hybrid chimera-like creatures. That's fake.
Or symbolic. That's symbolic.
That's fake. No. So there's a common root, right? So there's a foundational story that has given rise to a lot of mythology with these among these other cultures. But the fundamental principles of this common story are there: that the gods descended to the earth, that they cohabited with human beings, they copulated with human women, and they progenerated a race of hybrid demigods. That's a historical narrative across the board. Now, various cultures interpret this in various ways. The Hebrews are really, the Hebrews are really the only ones who view this as negative, as that this was a dystopian nightmare, that the gods who descended to the earth were in rebellion against the Most High God, that the knowledge that they distributed to human beings corrupted the human race and led to the cataclysm of the flood. Now, in the other cultures, they have the inverse, because they're Luciferian. They're coming from a Luciferian theological perspective, in which the gods that descended were the good guys, and that they gave mankind, they gave this forbidden knowledge to mankind because they were benefactors of mankind. And they are the ones that, and if you mix this in with ancient astronaut theory, then these gods created us and so forth. So that's a very anti-biblical perspective, which the pagan nations had. So I don't really care what they say in their mythologies. if you're coming at this from a biblical perspective, then we're talking about the cosmological, historical narrative of the Hebrews, which casts these gods as insubordinate sons of God, i.e., watchers who descended to the earth and physically engaged with human women, physically copulated with human women. So there's nothing symbolic here at all. This isn't in the context of a prophetic perceptual experience. This is history. And in the same way that the alien abduction is not in the context of a perceptual experience. It's not a near-death experience. It's not sleep paralysis. It's not an out-of-body experience. It is in the same way extremely, utterly physical. Everything about it is physical. Now there are some perceptual elements, again, false memories that are implanted into your brain. So abductees that can have some conscious recall of an abduction event are often recalling false memories. And so you have all manner of wacky things in there, all kinds of based on their background, much like a near-death experience, based on their cultural or religious background, they'll say that, these beautiful beings showed up in my room. They were beings of light, and they were giving me a message about, how I need to reach a higher spiritual vibration or something like that. If you're coming from the New Age, when in reality, what actually happened was gray aliens showed up and abducted that person, and they were subjected to the typical procedures on board the alien vessel. That's the abduction phenomenon. It is utterly physical.
What do you think about the notion, if someone were to say the alien phenomenon and its hybridization elements is the same thing and is a rebranding, a long-form deception, mixing up, let's say, the characters, the visage, things of that nature, but is at its core the exact same thing?
I wouldn't necessarily
perpetrated by the same perpetrators.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, although I don't believe that the Watchers are gray aliens, and I don't believe that the Insectolins are gray aliens. Now, are there? Let's say you have the Insectolins who are clearly managing the program, and for those who don't know the difference,
what makes you say that they're clearly managing the program? I'm just curious.
Based on the abduction material, the Insectolins
but what elements?
They're the ones in charge on board the craft.
They have the clipboards.
Oh no, they have the capes. Literally, they wear capes.
They wear capes. I didn't know they wear capes
with high collars. Oh. And they are the managers of the program. They're clearly in charge. I think they manufacture the grays, the little grays. I would describe them as the organic biological species, the Insectolins. Now, these are the mantid beings that Insectolin is a term that was created by Dr. David Jacobs. Now, is it possible that above the Insectolins, that the architects of this entire thing are quote unquote fallen angels? Okay, I got no problem with that. That's a distinct possibility. Now, that doesn't mean that the gray aliens are demons. They're not disembodied spirits of dead giants. And I don't believe they're meat suits, by the way, for many reasons. It doesn't make any logical sense that the grays are meat suits. Look, not everything has to be a fallen angel, a fallen angel, or a demon. Okay, that's not the only things that exist in the universe. God doesn't have to tell us about everything that exists. He is under no obligation to tell us anything at all, actually.
Would you say that the categories could be twofold, or is there a third, meaning in alignment with God, in opposition to God? Or is there a neutral in all this? And can a thing be neutral on the topic of God?
That's a really good question. The Bible seems to suggest that there are neutral factions. There's a verse, and I'm trying to remember where it is, where Miros is invoked, and curse Miros and the inhabitants thereof, because they did not come to aid the Lord against the mighty. Okay, so this sounds like a Switzerland faction. That's kind of like, nah, we're not going to get involved here. And who is the Lord being aided? Why does the Lord need aid against the mighty? So I think that this is invoking a war, a conflict that took place in a pre-Adamic context. Of course, I go through all of this in my book, Birthright, and that it was factional. There were factions. There was obviously the great rebel, the dragon, who engaged in an insurrection against the king of heaven and the kingdom of heaven, and he drew into his rebellion other actors who aligned themselves with him against the kingdom of heaven. They were the minority, but there was a massive conflict. I think that conflict led to the obliteration of a planet called Rahab in the Bible, and that this reference to Miros. And by the way, this is what some Jewish commentators believe as well. Not that I really care what Jewish commentators think, but I find it interesting. Some Jewish commentators believe that Miros was a planet, and it was inhabited, interestingly enough, I'm trying to remember the specific ancient Jewish writing where they say this. It's in my book. Interestingly enough, they believe that Miros was inhabited by beings of intellect who were scientific, who were profoundly intellectual, but they didn't have like human empathy. They weren't like us. Well, that sounds like gray aliens to me, but I don't know if that's the case. But yeah, it's certainly possible that there are all kinds of factions out there in the universe. And the question is, in regard to people say, well, how does that fit into the Bible? Well, it's very simple. It's allegiance. What is your allegiance to the kingdom of heaven? Are you for the king or are you against him? That's what it boils down to. It's allegiance. Everything is allegiance. That's what it was to the ancient Israelites.
Well, doesn't
allegiance.
Jesus say, whoever is not with me or not for me is against me?
That's why they say.
So then in that way, then there's only two camps.
Well, I mean,
you're
there's
either
perhaps
against him or with him.
Who think they're neutral or attempting to act neutrally. But that's why the Lord says, curse ye Miros and the inhabitants thereof. So, yeah, I think that it's very factional. I think this thing is way bigger than we can even comprehend. We're not told everything. We're like dumb children over here. We can't hardly comprehend the things that have been told to us. That's why Jesus spoke to us like little children in parables, which are, by the way, parables are a form of allegory. That's how the Son of God spoke to us when he walked among us. He treated us like little children, ignorant. God does not tell us everything. He's under no obligation to tell you anything about anything, but he has conveyed to us the gospel of his Son. And we have enough information to know how to please God, who he is, what he expects of us, and to comport ourselves in a way that honors him and to be loyal to him and his kingdom. We have enough information for that for sure from the Bible, but it doesn't tell us everything. The Bible, we have a kind of being, you can call it a being. I'm not sure that would be the right term for it. That is living with us right now. Unquestionably, this is a matter of fact, okay? That is co-inhabiting the earth with us right now, that the Bible says nothing about, absolutely nothing, okay? And I'm going to use the word being, even though it's not technically correct. What I'm referencing here are advanced robotics with artificial intelligence, right? Correct? We are living in a time when we have advanced robotics, and I'm talking about, you guys have seen the Tesla robot and the robots that are much more advanced than Tesla. Some of the ones that are being developed, for example, by Boston Dynamics. Absolutely mind-blowing how advanced these robots are. Human, and a lot of them are humanoid, right? So you have the physical hardware of a humanoid, right? And then you have the software, the consciousness, maybe we can call it, even though I don't think it's consciousness, but by way of analogy here, a consciousness in the form of artificial intelligence walking among us right now, right? This is fact. The Bible says exactly nothing about this reality. Zero, nothing. Doesn't predict it, doesn't allude to it. Now you could say, oh, there's this amorphous text here that might mean, knowledge will increase and so forth. Sure. But what I'm trying to illustrate here is we have this robotic artificial intelligence. There's nothing to indicate in the scriptures that this reality
Well, some would
that
say
this
that the
become
passage in Revelation where men want to die, they seek death and they can't die,
okay?
that's
That's
alluding to
sure. That's an amorphous reference to something that we can speculate about. I personally think that that's because of the post-human condition, transhumanism, and that there's some sort of a biological, a cybernetic component there, or genetic component that makes it very difficult for people to die in the future. That's speculation. I might be right. I might be wrong about that. But there's nothing.
I think that what we're talking about here, it's a completely different conversation. But since you reject the spiritual realm, I think these things go hand in hand. And you had asked earlier in the episode, what do I think about the internet realm? And it's like, I don't know. It's kind of like a different way to get into this weird spiritual realm. It exists on electricity, electrical synapses. It exists on physical properties that we can manipulate here. And I think that you can do that to get into different realms. Same way you can hijack a brain with DMT, with different neurological conditions. I think they're just different ways to peel the same apple.
Yeah, we're just parsing over words. I mean, there's another realm that has physicality. That doesn't mean it's not spiritual because it has physicality.
Well, yeah, what is spiritual? Well, hold on now. That's a good point. What is spiritual then?
Well, I'd say it's the realm, for one, that God lives in, right? Like where God's at.
Well,
Jesus
God is
at the right hand.
According to Jesus, God is spirit. God himself
I think it's
amen.
Spiritual is like kind of like this unseen realm that we're going around.
But that's what we would say in that 2 Kings 6 passage, right? That I talked about a little bit earlier, is like Elisha's servant goes out. He's physically there. It looks like he's taking a piss, whatever. It's early in the morning. He's on an expedition, kind of like you in Peru. But now he's covered by the Syrian camp, right? And he says, my master, what's going on, man? We're surrounded by this army. And then Elisha says, no, bro, don't even sweat it, because there's more that are with us than are there with them.
He prayed that
into like a visionary state.
He prayed that his servant's eyes would be opened.
Amen. Not that something.
So we have,
and
then he saw the chariots of God surrounding the enemies, right? So we have a problem. I refer to it as perceptual cataracts, because that's precisely what Paul describes when he says that we see in a mirror dimly, or we see through a glass dimly. Okay, this is perceptual cataracts. So there's more to created order than we can perceive. Okay, let's put it in these terms. I subscribe to the hyperspatial theory of the universe. The hyperspatial theory of the universe posits that there are more dimensions than the three that are directly accessible to us, albeit very, very tiny dimensions. We're talking like subatomic dimensions that are not accessible to us, but nevertheless could be perceivable by us if we had the ability to perceive them. Now, we can perceive them to some extent with technology, right? And we probably will increasingly, as we move into the future, be able to perceive these additional dimensions to the universe. Now, these dimensions that I'm talking about in the hyperspatial universe are not other realms. They're not like, it's not multiverse. These aren't other universes. These aren't other dimensional worlds. These are simply additional directional dimensions of our universe that are inaccessible to us and imperceivable by us. However, I would contend that that mankind, in our original condition, that we could perceive the dimensional totality of created order. We could perceive it. For example, right now, we can't see an infrared, right? But we know that the infrared spectrum, the band exists on the spectrum. It's just not within that narrow window that we can actually see with our eyeballs, right? But it's still there. Now, that isn't a different dimension. That's just
what most of us refer to as the spirit realm, you refer to as hyperspatial, then, is really what we're getting.
No, not necessarily. So the problem is that you guys can't define what you mean by spirit. So what do the people in this spirit realm do?
Well, there's a lot going on.
What does the Holy Spirit do?
Do they drink?
Yeah, I mean, they show up in the natural realm too. Like, to your point,
no,
maybe they're there all along, but then we have the ability to see them. They show up with God at Sodom and Gomorrah. There's these angels that come along with them. They're eating, they're drinking. They show up, they hang out with Abraham. I mean, there's a lot of stuff they do.
Do they do those things in that spirit realm that you're invoking? Do they do those things?
I don't see why they wouldn't. I think there's physicality in the spirit realm.
That's great. I'm glad you're saying that. Okay, so what is the difference between that spiritual realm that you're talking about and just the universe that we inhabit?
Access, right? Like, who's there, who's not? I mean, it's just an access thing.
But, okay, so why couldn't what you're describing just be another place within our universe?
I don't see why it can't.
Okay, good. I'm glad you said that. So that would make it okay. Let's be a little bit more specific. Okay, people get uncomfortable when we do.
I mean,
this,
it's there, right? In the 2 Kings 6, it's there. It's just now he can see it.
Yes, but that's what I was trying to illustrate is that's a perceptual problem. Elijah prayed that his servant's eyes would be opened. In other words, they're there. We just don't have the ability to perceive the totality of created order. And I would concede, I subscribe to the hyperspatial theory of the universe, in that there are facets of the universe that are all around us, but are inaccessible to us. Nevertheless, they are facets of this universe, of this realm, of this universe. So I think that the kingdom of God has locality. I think it's probably at the very center of the universe. Everything that we do here on earth, they do there. They eat, they drink, they make music. There's cities, there's walls, there's technology. That, in fact, what we have is derived, what we have comes from there. We didn't invent civilization, we inherited it. And so there's a lot of confusion when the word spiritual is invoked in any kind of a conversation, because what people automatically think is disembodied. Like this is a disembodied realm, like an ethereal disembodied realm, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because there's no difference scripturally between that realm, that quote unquote realm, and this one. Rather, what appears to be the reality is that there's other places in our universe where these beings come from. Okay, so it's an extraterrestrial reality as much as it would ever be an extra dimensional reality. And when people invoke extra dimensions, the problem that I have with this is that you guys understand that there are, first of all, there is no proof. There really is no scientific, even though I subscribe to the hyperspatial theory of the universe, there's no scientific proof that there are any higher dimensions or anything like that. We still don't have any ironclad proof. What we have are, dozens, not just a few, dozens of disparate scientific theories that differ one from another, incorporating the idea of extra dimensions. There is no unified theory of extra dimensions. There's the alternative worlds theory. There's the hyperspatial theory. There's multiverse. There's a suite of different theories, and they're all different. But what we do, all of us collectively, what we do when we invoke extra dimensions and spiritual realms, what we're doing is we are, and I do this too, we are unconsciously referencing pop culture. We're referencing our ideas of the spiritual realm or of an extra dimensional realm or interdimensional beings come from movies.
You started this show referencing pop culture, so that's a little bit disingenuous. Like,
well, those are good examples. Lord of the Rings.
Well,
and,
I think Stranger Things is a good example of people possibly channeling.
So,
and
but
telling
can I just ask this then? So, like when Paul goes to the third heaven, like how do you describe that then? Like what's he doing? What is that?
He said he doesn't know if it was in the body or out of body. I don't think he went anywhere. No one ever went anywhere, ever. Even Enoch, if you read the book of Enoch, didn't go anywhere, contrary to popular belief. He was taken, but he was taken somewhere else on the earth, and his activity, the book of Enoch says, was with the watchers, being the intermediary between the good watchers in heaven, the holy watchers, and the apostate watchers on earth.
So Jesus' ascension in Acts 1,
Jesus says, I'm glad you brought up Jesus. Yeah, Jesus is different. Okay, Jesus is completely different. He's the Son of God. He descended from heaven. Jesus said that no man has ascended or descended from heaven save the Son of Man. Okay, so Jesus is the one who descended from heaven, and Jesus said that no man has seen the Father at any time, by the way. So yes, heaven is a place. I think it's a physical place. Yes, Jesus is there. He went there. Okay, that's where we are going, by the way. It's not about heaven, it's about the Father's house more than anything. That's where the Father's house is. That's where we began. Adam was a son of God in the family of God. That's another conversation. The Garden of Eden, heaven, paradise, all synonymous terms in the Bible. So what I'm saying is in reference to pop culture. So I said we all do it, okay? But our reference is primarily from pop culture. So what we're doing is we're taking the Marvel universe, the MCU. We're taking the sort of the Lord of the Rings Middle Earth ideas, although that's kind of different because Lord of the Rings doesn't invoke dimensional stuff. Chronicles of Narnia does. And we're taking Stranger Things and we're taking all these different pop culture tropes and we're blending them together, and we're saying there's interdimensional beings that are coming from a different dimensional world into ours, and they're manifesting or whatever differently, and then they go back into their other dimensional world. But what we've done and what we do so often is we take all these disparate scientific ideas and we throw them into a blender, and it's very, very confusing. Again, the problem is we have to be defining terms. So what specifically, and I'm not saying, because naturally I know this is what people are thinking, well, angels are interdimensional, aliens are interdimensional. That's surely what so many people are thinking. That's a primary contention that I hear, even more so than aliens or demons. They're interdimensional. Now, maybe, I don't know. I'm not here to say they're I don't have any proof that they're not. But when people invoke that kind of terminology, I insist that they define what they mean. Which scientific theory are you invoking? Okay, let's be specific here. If you're invoking a multiverse construct, which is what most people do, in fact, most Christians, they're invoking a multiverse. And multiverse comes, multiverse is prominent in like the Marvel movies, right? So there's like a different universe in which in multiverse, there's different versions of you. There's different versions of Spider-Man. There's different versions of Captain America, right?
I disagree with that, but
yeah, and we actually talk against that pretty commonly on the show, not because I disagree with, the way that quantum physics has alluded to it in one theoretical way or another. More so the fact that Hollywood, which tends to be this massive propaganda machine, has been feeding us that for the last few decades in a huge way. And I would agree with you. It's bled into the cultural zeitgeist in such a way that, yeah, people use it interchangeably. I'm very cautious of rebranding terminology.
I just want to ask Timothy Alberino, though. I don't care about the multiverse and the Avengers and the Rings movie. I'm not even asking that. I'm just saying, like, we know Jesus went away at the ascension, and I'm curious. I want to know Timothy Alberino's view on it. You guys make fun of me because I've been a fan of him for a long time. I am curious. Me too. Like, what is that place where Jesus goes? Is it another planet? Like, I think Phineas Dake used to say it was another planet, like the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven is actually another planet. Is that what you're alluding to, or like what?
I don't know exactly what the kingdom of heaven is, but I do believe it's in the physical universe, and that's where Jesus went.
In a physical universe, in the sense that if we had the technology, we could travel to it,
like the Tower of Babel kind of thing.
Yes, I believe that's what I mean when I say that. I believe that the kingdom of heaven has locality,
and then when it shows up here and it's in the mountains, and it got here, it physically got here. It wasn't just kind of there in the mist in the spirit realm. It physically got here. And then Elisha's servant's eyes were open where he could actually see it. But there was physicality that they came from somewhere to be there in those mountains.
Yes. The Watchers came to the earth. They descended to the summit of Hermon from somewhere else. Now you can quibble and you can say, well, it's not somewhere in the universe. Okay, well, where is it? Well, they come from a spiritual realm. Okay, so it's an extraterrestrial spiritual realm. All right, but they're physical beings. Yes, but they come from a spiritual realm. That doesn't make any sense to me. It literally means nothing to me. Okay, well, they come from another dimension. Okay, so it's an extra-dimensional, extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional world. Okay, what makes it different from our universe? Are we talking multiverse? Are they coming from a different universe that has different scientific properties? In other words, the laws of nature are different where they come from. But see, that doesn't make any sense, because if they're coming here, let's be specific to aliens here. If aliens are coming here from a different universe with different physical properties, their technology wouldn't make any sense to us. They wouldn't have their anatomy wouldn't make any sense to us. Their technology, when it crashes, and we can to some extent understand some of it, reverse engineer some of it. There's claims, I think are credible claims, by the way, the fiber optics and night vision and some of these other things have come from the legacy program. I suspect that there's some truth to that. So how would we make sense of like interdimensional technology? That doesn't make any sense. So I don't see why we need to invoke a spiritual realm, or B, an interdimensional realm when we're talking about the things that happen within the biblical context, and also the UFO phenomenon. Why do we need to invoke any of that? Can't we answer all the questions inside of our universe?
Well, I don't know. It says that the worlds were framed by the word of God, and those things which appear were made of things that don't appear, right? Like something was made, excuse me, from an unseen realm. And there is like properties where Jesus shows up and he can come through walls. Unseen realm? I don't know, where Jesus comes through walls, right? Like he can like defy physicality coming through a wall to be in the room, but then at the same time, he can be in union with physicality and he's eating. He can kind of do both with that glorified body. So
well,
I don't know, but I guess we're just kind of like parsing words.
And I think we're saying possibly, and Timothy's saying definitely not. So that's
definitely not what.
No, I think he's kind of saying a lot of the same stuff. We're just kind of parsing.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's minutia, it's nuance, it's definitions, which is fair. I mean, you need to have a firm ground to
argue from. Your main thing this whole time and watching this from an outsider was that like Timothy Alberino definitely came hard in the old Gen 6 production stuff, talking about like, yeah, man, when this stuff comes on the scene, dude, from the alien realm, there's going to be the Antichrist is going to come from that. And you're just kind of looking more for him to sound the alarm nowadays.
Well, we already hashed that out.
Back then.
I understand where he's coming from on that topic. I think we beat that one to death. There is something that I would like his opinion on because he's so close to this alien. Tim, you're so close to this.
We'll wrap it up after this.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up after this because we're at the 2-hour mark.
And Timothy, thank you. If I was rude specifically,
you guys were rude.
I'm always very rude.
I appreciate you guys.
Actually, I want to say thank you not only for coming on this time, but showing up like episode 30 of this show.
Earlier, giving us 2 hours.
Really early, giving us 2 hours of your time.
You guys specifically told me I can't glaze them, and you're glazing them now. You made me not do that.
We can glaze now.
It's okay,
all
at the end. At the end.
All right, listen. We spoke about what we had to talk
about.
I
want a little time to glaze, but go ahead and do the
There is something that I want his opinion on because something that's really shown itself in the UAP community is this element of the divine feminine. It's coming predominantly from like the Bledsoes who are referencing the lady. And these aren't authorities necessarily, but they are louder voices in the space. What was the gentleman's name with the UAP, the egg retrieval? Jason, I forgot what his name is, but the big famous egg retrieval. Jake Barber is also filled with this thing that he defined as the goddess. He used the language, the goddess. Now, the goddess is an element that shows up over and over again. The Catholic Church, which is, one of your favorite institutions, the Vatican in particular, it talks about, Mother Mary being a co-redeemer. Chris Bledsoe says that this entity he's engaging with is Mother Mary, but goes by a plethora of names. Hathor. I think likely Ishtar and all these other things are tossed in there. And this is something that I see really on the side of the deception angle, and we have been primed as a people, as a culture, to receive this idea of the divine feminine. It's really a cultural phenomenon, especially with feminism and things of that nature. And then there's even this other additional connection of Jack Parsons, employed by Jet Propulsion Laboratories. He's out in the middle of the deserts with L. Ron Hubbard, and he's summoning through Aleister Crowley's works, this entity called Babylon that, some say is supposed to usher in this era of radical freedom and divine energy and all these other things. And so I can't help but look at that and wonder if that's kind of what we are or have been prepped to receive. And now we're seeing the actual manifestation of that in the UAP space in regards to the goddess or the divine feminine. Are you seeing this? What do you make of that?
I completely agree with that. Yeah, I think that now therein lies deception. Okay. This is a great illustration here of why we need to delineate on this topic of UFOs and the alien presence, why it's so important to define our terms and to separate the different pieces and parts that we're talking about. So what you're referring to is messaging that's coming from Bledsoe, which is in my estimation deceptive. I think that Bledsoe is an abductee. In fact, I know he is. Him and his family are abductees. Now, they are conveying information that is perhaps some of it completely fabricated, some of it screen memories, and perhaps some of it they're being used specifically for deceptive purpose. I don't know, or a mix of all of those things. Okay, so now you're talking about messaging, and we're on this now. We're on board here together. The messaging there is deceptive, but let's take that and put it over here. We can agree that all of that divine feminine and all that crap, yes, that's very highly deceptive, highly intermingle with the occult. That's over here. Then let's take crash retrievals. Let's take the testimony of whistleblowers, and let's put that over here in a different bin. Let's just call that, and I don't know if you guys agree with that, but for the sake of argument, let's just call that fact, hard fact.
It does get a little messy because the dude that retrieved that egg,
it doesn't matter.
He's
That's
actually retrieving it, and he's having this thing happen to him. But yeah, no, I agree. We'll separate that for now.
That's Jake Barber, who I know. He just described how the being in the craft that he was transporting, it was on a lead line under his helicopter, some kind of a saucer. Apparently there was a being inside of the saucer that was communicating something to him, some sort of a empathic communication that overwhelmed him with these feelings, which he describes as the divine feminine, whatever. I don't know what that is. There's nothing there. I have nothing to evaluate there. There's really no message there. There's just a feeling. Now, if he were to come forward and say, yes, and now this being tells me that, you know, Jesus wasn't the Son of God. Oh, now I have something to evaluate. And I can tell you that that's a lie, right? But I can't evaluate somebody who's interpreting feelings they're getting from an experience. So I really don't have anything to say about that, except for I think Jake Barber's telling the truth, and I think he was actually recovering some craft with something interesting inside of them. But let's set Jake aside for a moment. Let's talk about the ones who've testified in Congress. That bin over here, I would say these are just facts that are coming out about a phenomenon that is real. Legacy program's real. Crash retrievals happen. The bodies are recovered. There's biological bodies. They die. I have whistleblowers coming to me, by the way, telling me stories behind the scenes that confirm all of this as well. And that's just that bin is just fact. There's no messaging there. Okay. There's no messaging. There's no disinformation there that I can perceive. There's no disinformation. Now, I'm not talking about fake photos that were presented I'm just talking about the basic claims of the whistleblowers. That's just fact. Over here.
Okay, but about the divine feminine aspect, though. Yeah, the Bledsoe, because these are the guys that are
I'm trying to get these things separate in your head because you have them jumbled together. And I'm trying to say, no, separate these things. In the Bledsoe situation, you have messaging, and worse, you have theological messaging there. That's a whole different situation that's unfolding there. And I think a lot of it is just BS, by the way.
You're getting like this Gnostic principle of Sophia, who's a counterpart to Christ that, you know, is untalked about. Like this is something that permeates Gnosticism, but a plethora of other, you know, mystic schools or what's the correct terminology? Mystery schools.
Yeah, and some of the guys like, you know, Jake Barber is in Bledsoe's camp. Okay. And then you got some of the other guys like Lou and Grush, who think he's nuts. Okay. Or at least I'm assuming that with I shouldn't say, let me retract that. I don't know what Lou thinks about Bledsoe, but I know that some of the guys who are the nuts and bolts guys who know that the phenomenon is real, who've been involved in the crash retrieval stuff, think that this other stuff over here, the divine, that this is all bullcrap. Okay. So what I'm trying to do is get you guys to think in a much more complex way about this topic and to differentiate these things.
Well, to put this to bed, I am very aware there's a craft retrieval. I understand all that. And I don't think that these people are lying when they're retrieving these things. And I don't think that reporting on the things that you've retrieved or the nature of the technology or any of those things is a deception. I'm not concerned about that. If you find a thing, and you're reverse engineering it, if the government has access to technology from these report on that, that's fine. I'm not saying that you're part of a deception or anything like that. These are just the nuts and bolts. So that's fine on this show, and our audience is also aware. This is just one aspect of it. If you have a guy that is just nuts and bolts and he's looking at the technological aspect of it and he decides to report on it, well, that's exactly what it is, and that's fine. So I'm not too concerned with that aspect. But this other thing, this weird divine feminine, you know, as you said, crap. And especially in conjunction with the timely announcement of the Vatican or the Catholic Church that Mary is co-redeemer alongside Christ, and then Bledsoe saying that this thing is Mary. That starts to paint a really fascinating picture, and it's got quite a megaphone right now. It's very loud. It's going viral constantly. Chris Bledsoe was just on a big podcast. I forget the name of it, but surely millions and millions of views, and definitely is going to sway the opinion of people who are, you know, on the edge of their seats watching the UFO disclosure unfold.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that at all. Let me, before we go, let me ask you guys a question. Okay, here we go. I'm going to paint you guys a scenario, and I just want to get you to respond to this. Okay.
I like where this is going.
We have a situation unfolding in which, for decades, elements of the United States government, the military-industrial complex, together with aerospace contractors, have been involved in recovering, reverse engineering alien craft, deriving technology from it, interacting with the beings, the pilots, and dissecting their bodies, and also with the living pilots, and making, and let's just, for the sake of argument, okay, concede to this, making illegal bargains with these beings, which I would suggest to you has happened.
I would agree.
And I say illegal because they're being done in secret, and there's no consultation with the American people, which is the way that this kind of thing is supposed to happen. We're just lied to about all this. And then because all of this has been secret, kept secret for so long, all kinds of illegal things have happened behind the scenes. As I said earlier, the most nefarious things you can imagine, okay?
Yeah.
Human trafficking associated with this, experimentation on human beings, children, hybridization, illicit programs of hybridization, in our attempt to understand the technology and to access it, harness it, okay? People have been murdered over this thing. So there's a lot of crime. This is deep, this is dark, this is nefarious, and this is highly illegal, okay? That's here. Now you have, and over here, you have a group of people who are saying, hey, this thing's real, this program's real, and it's illegal, and we need to get oversight. And furthermore, the people who are involved in it, they say this behind the scenes, people who are involved in it need to be prosecuted for lying to the American people. And the American people have the right to know that this is happening, because some of the money is our money, right? That's funding this evil stuff. That's over here. And then over here on this side, you have a group of people who are saying, nope, nope, the American people should not be informed. Keep a lid on this. Nobody needs to know anything about this. Congress doesn't need to know. Nothing to see here. Which side of that are you guys on?
When we watched that documentary, I said, this is probably what Alberino is talking about, is exactly what he just said, was that, like, hey, I'm glad that something's coming forth. I just think our position when we watched the documentary was that it was creepy. It was like, it felt like the beginning of coronavirus, where they were like, you got to stay 6 feet away. You got to wear the mask. Like, here's the talking points with creepy bullet points. And it was very corny and plasticky feeling. But I said that was probably his position, and why he like defended it was it like, hey, at least it's coming forth.
I get it.
At least it's being said.
And I get it. It's just, I don't know, my experience of the last 6-7 years of like I was more in the political realm before. And you start to realize that you've been played a fool a bit. This left-right dynamic is nonsense. And I don't mean to like shoo politics. They're important in some way, like obviously how we govern ourselves. But I know when I'm being given something and I'm being told to choose. The Jewish question is a great one right now. This is out there. There's There's a dynamic going, and they're saying, hate them, love them. Neither of these are the answer. There's a lot more nuance here. So what I'm looking at is guys like Lou Elizondo who are in the government, and I'm looking at other people who are in the government, and they're saying we need to suppress, we need to release. The truth is somewhere in between.
I mean, I would say that it does. Oh, go ahead.
What I see here, though, is an idea that's time has come.
Yeah.
This is happening whether we like it or not. I'm just trying to be perceptive of the narrative that comes with it, and the people that are presenting the narrative.
And who's going to control it, yeah.
And who's going to control it? Someone's going to control this narrative. But like, if there are non-human intelligence and it's their time and they're ready to present themselves, Lou Elizondo's not going to stop this. The Collins, the leader, not going to stop this. Your favorite senator is not going to stop this. They can control the release. They can control the demolition of America. They can control the release of the public and persuade our opinions on it. And that's kind of how I'm looking at this. And I feel like I'm being manipulated, especially by that documentary for sure.
But it seems like you guys are kind of skirting around the question. Based on the things that the data points I presented, wouldn't you, all of you, acknowledge that the guys who are trying to tell the American people the truth and get oversight over these programs that are rogue, wouldn't you say those are the good guys?
That's the
No,
question,
this
though.
is
Is that what's happening?
This is like the same question.
Yes,
like, yeah,
that's
I
what's
voted.
happening. I can tell
I
you.
voted
with the
for-
guys that are
that's what's
destroying
happening.
the Greys.
No,
Wouldn't
no,
the guys who are destroying the Greys.
I
be the
voted
good
for
guys?
Donald Trump to get a certain thing, and now we're here with these Epstein files that will not be released. And I didn't vote specifically for the Epstein
Yeah,
files.
but we're
I
not talking
voted for
about
no
Donald
more.
Trump. We're talking.
But we
we're
are talking
very-
about this left. We're talking about a left-right dynamic and like this boomer
There
brain
is
of
no
telling me
left-right
I've got to choose.
dynamic here.
It
There
is.
is no left-right dynamic here. There's a bunch of there's a lot of terrible things happening in the cover of darkness, miles beneath our feet, that have been that there's been no oversight for generations. Okay, and this technology has leaked and is being used. Face peelers, Peru. Michael Herrera's testimony, human trafficking. This stuff is being used to do the most nefarious things because there has been no oversight and the American people have been lied to. The world has been lied to. Okay. So it's a very simple question. Is exposing that and getting oversight over it and telling the American people the truth, is that a noble endeavor? Forget
I
about
don't know
politics.
if
There's
it's
no
that
politics.
easy of a
Wait,
question.
guys.
No, I
We're
don't-
missing the point here.
yeah.
It's a hypothetical. How would
Yeah,
you
yeah.
feel if you didn't have breakfast this morning?
I
Right?
feel hungry.
So,
But I did
yeah,
have breakfast
if that
this
was
morning.
truly what was being presented, if that was the nature of
That
it,
is
if it
what's
was
being
that clean and
presented.
cut, I disagree with the fact that it's that clean and cut. But let's add a third option. I would say I would err on the side of the guys that are going to release the information, and I would do my best to use my platform to insert the gospel into the minds of anybody who is looking at this thing, because they are
Yes.
going to need it going forward. So, yeah, I mean that's
Yes.
a
This is
fair.
happening whether we like it or not.
And I would say
Yes.
that if you were a guy who was like, let's say hypothetically, really close to the situation, close to like an Elizondo or something like that. You used to be, intimate with like megalithic structures, maybe in like a South American country, I don't know, whatever. And you had yourself grounded in Christ.
I'm
and
not
you
sure
were
what you
like
mean by
close to the
intimate with megalithic
situation.
structures.
I'm just saying, if you were that kind of guy and you were on a show and you wanted to give some indicator that you're just trying to maintain some air of being reasonable and not be outcasted by a nuts and bolts community that's right up the ass of disclosure, maybe you would do a thing on a show like a little meow, or
I would pick a side. Hey, listen, if I'm gonna be able to learn a little bit more about what I've been studying for the last couple of decades, yeah, I pick a side, and I pick the side of the guys that are clearly going to do it. So I guess that's the answer to your question. But neither side is correct. This is happening.
You
either
didn't think
way.
that documentary was creepy the way it was laid
was
out?
creepy.
It was like
One of the things
coronavirus
that-
beginning vibes. Like, okay,
I
this
didn't think
is
it
how
was
they're gonna
creepy at all.
control
I
the
thought it was
narrative.
extremely
Well, you know
well
what it was,
produced.
Tim?
Wait,
it was like
what did you
after
say?
you were watching it.
Sorry, what did you say,
He just
Tim?
said he didn't think it was creepy at all.
I didn't think it was
And
creepy
I'm
at all.
saying-
I think it was just a narrative that they were trying to frame the documentary in a way that people who are new to the topic can understand it, and that people who've been in the topic for a long time can also understand that what they're doing is confirming what ufologists have known for decades. That's what they're doing. They're just confirming. There's nothing that
Can I
they
ask
said
you
in
this,
that film.
Tim? You're a guy who's taken on a number of sizable projects, and this time right now that we're in seems very important. Is there anything on your horizon, maybe a partner documentary to what we just watched, that helps people see this through a Christian lens and remain grounded in the gospel? Could be, very valuable.
You
right
have like
now.
some sort of a program, right?
What do you mean? I have a program.
I saw
I have a
an announcement
community.
for-
I have a members
Right.
community where we talk about this stuff at length. I mean, we really get deep into the minutia, and that's Timothy. That's the AlberinoAnalysis.com. But I'm
You're
constantly
doing
doing
something
things
with L.A.
behind the
Marzulli
scenes.
soon, though, right?
I'm sorry.
You're doing. You're doing something with L.A. Marzulli. I saw an announcement on your.
I
Twitter
did an
or
interview
LA's
with LA. I did an interview with LA where at the end of the interview, he asked me if he could incorporate it into his conference.
Conference. Yeah, that's
So
right.
that's what that is. It was just an interview, and I didn't really, I had no objection to that. So that's what he did. But listen, I think that what we need to do, what you need to do here in the audience, I would say, and what Christians by and large need to do is decouple the reality of the phenomenon from the deception of the phenomenon. Decouple those things. We need to acknowledge the reality and not deny it, not pretend that the things that are real are not real, while at the same time being ready to refute, like in the case of the Bledsoe stuff, refute the messaging that is clearly anti-biblical. Okay, those are two different domains. You can acknowledge what's real and refute any kind of messaging that comes out that's contrary to the gospel of Christ. There was nothing about that that is confusing. There's nothing about that that is trying to play both sides. It's just acknowledging what is true and refuting theological messaging that is contrary to the gospel. That's what I do. And we don't get anywhere when people are still arguing about whether or not there's a crash retrieval program. We don't get anywhere.
That's off the table. Yeah, that we're far beyond that pale, I would say.
Yes. So
run of the mill.
And then you have to be able to differentiate between information that's like in that film, The Age of Disclosure, information that's being presented in a way that is the whole intention of that film was just to say, this is real. Here's a bunch of people who are in authority, who are acknowledging that it's real. And here's the part that a lot of people go nuts about. And this constitutes, actually, let me be very accurate. This may constitute a national security threat. Okay, that's the film. That's Age of Disclosure. This is real, and it may constitute a national security threat. That was the thrust of the film. There's no theological anything in it. Yeah, there's a group of evangelical Christians, and I'll say this, and I know we have to close here. This group of evangelical Christians who don't want the public to look at this topic, who don't want you to know anything about it, who want to keep the lid on it, nothing to see here. If you look at it, you're entertaining demons or something like that, right? These guys, and I have reason to believe, by the way, these are hardcore Zionist type people too, who are like Israel first, hardcore Zionism. So I'll bet you guys don't agree with that. I would suspect that you probably wouldn't agree with that.
But that logically doesn't track, because a hardcore Zionist would be trying to bring about the end of times.
They would be.
So
No.
It doesn't track. You're talking about dispensational evangelical Christians. Okay, it does track. And dispensational evangelical Christians, the vast majority of them think aliens are just demons. The whole thing's just a deception. Just throw it all out. UFOs and crash retrieval, it's all just fake, gay deception, whatever. And they're hardcore Zionists. That's exactly who we're talking about. Okay, it's precisely who we're talking about here. So, am I with that crowd? No, I'm not a Zionist, and I'm not anti-Israel. I'm just not a Zionist, and I'm not. And I'm not dispensational, and I'm not anti-dispensational. I have lots of friends who are dispensational Christians, and I love these people, and I support them, and I've got nothing against it. I'm just not that. Just understand that when you invoke the Collins elite, that it's not that these people are these righteous people who know for a fact that aliens are demons, and they're just trying to protect the public from a deception. No, yes, in their minds they are. That doesn't mean that they're right. In my perspective, they're certainly not right about a lot of the other things they do. So I think they're misguided. And I am with the Christians who want to tell the truth and who want to bust the bad guys, who want to end this illicit activity. And there's specifically a group who I work with that they want to gather enough evidence of all these terrible things that are happening related to this topic and other topics as well, present it to the president and to the administration, and give them the opportunity to redress it, to shut these programs down, to tell the American people the truth, to prosecute the people who have committed these terrible things, to go after these rogue rogue companies who are using the technology to do nefarious things. That's what these guys want. Guess what? I'm there. That's me. That's what I want.
I think that is a good place to leave it.
That is, but I would actually like to make a request.
I just put my hat on.
Oh, stop it. We're not ending it on your terms.
Jeez.
Timothy, thank you for taking the time to meet with us. If you would, Matt, could you take us out in prayer? Because I feel like what we're talking about.
We gotta let him do his. his plugs and tell people, you know, 'cause
that's
you've
right.
written a lot of books and a lot of fantastic documentaries. And I think that, you know, after this discussion, a lot of people are going to be fascinated to look into more of your work. So if you could, before we do that,
Right.
let everybody know what you've worked on, where they can find these things.
Well, everybody knows I have a YouTube channel. I'm on X and Instagram. My handle's always the same, Timothy Alberino. I have a whole film series, well, 3 films in a series that I've never published publicly. They're excellent. I'd say they're better than the True Legend series. That's in my members community, and I produced this some years ago. And it's more like about ancient history and elongated skulls and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of material over there in my members community. But you know, I've got a lot going on, projects that are happening this year that if people want to track with those, follow me on social media, follow me on YouTube. And I just want to say, I appreciate you guys being willing to do this. I think we probably agree on way more than we would ever disagree on. I think that once terms are properly defined, there's probably very little that we disagree on. So I just want to make it clear that I am not team deception, okay? And I don't just believe what the government says, and I don't just believe what Lou Elizondo says or David Grush. I'm not that guy. But behind the scenes, I'm interacting with people who want to drop the hammer on the real demonic stuff that's going on in the background, okay? I'm with those guys. Just to be clear, I'm with those guys. Thank you guys for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for
Thank you.
coming on.
And
I knew we were
just-
going to agree on
yeah,
more
Matt,
than not.
Just take us out in a quick prayer, like just about discernment, because this is very confusing. Do you see how like we're in such a tussle over terms,
Yeah.
definitions, and it's crazy.
I hope this serves that like 9-to-5 worker who doesn't have the time to delve into these topics, whose occupation it isn't. You know, we're all strapped for time, and this is a confusing landscape to navigate. And so I hope that this serves somebody out there. And if anything, I hope that it brought someone closer to the gospel of Christ. But please, yeah, Matt, take it away.
God, I just want to thank you for even making this a possibility today. You, God, of all people, know how grateful I am for the dude, Timothy Alberino, and how wild this story is that this dude's just like on the TV now in the coffee shop, and we're having this conversation with him. And I'm just very grateful for this, God. I just pray that like we wouldn't get lost in the minutia, and that the common people wouldn't get lost in the minutia, in the parsing over words and details and some of the stuff that just kind of like takes us totally off track, Lord. But that, I don't know, like all this alien stuff, Lord, you know, it's not even my thing. Like, I don't really know much about all this stuff. I just know that there are entities that are going to reveal themselves and try to deceive us. And your word talks about how that men's hearts are going to be feeling them for fear for things coming on the earth. And I just pray against all that stuff for everybody listening and everybody that's here today, God. I pray that like Timothy Alberino would be our boy for long term, like in the fight, because honestly, man, I think we have to really keep track of like who's on our team and who's not on our team. And I'm really grateful for this discussion, that some of this stuff was able to be borne out, and some of Raven's, you know, real genuine concerns were able to be brought up, and Timothy was able to talk through it. And I'm grateful that Top wasn't like super nasty, but was able to get his point across too. Like, this was just a rad thing. And I'm incredibly grateful to just have been a part of it, Lord. But that's really my prayer, is that Alberino would continue to be a voice. You know, he's been a voice in my life for, you know, probably a decade now, and even into my kids' life and all these things. And I pray that he would continue to be that for many more people, that he's moved the ball like so far down the field for most of modern American Christians that just couldn't handle like the things that were being said 10 years ago. He's moved that ball so far. And I just pray that he'd continue to do that, and we'd be like a team doing that, Lord, that we would stay focused on like who's on the team and who's not in regards to the kingdom of God, Lord. I just pray that you'd have your hand on us and guide us and instruct us and allow us to really preach truth everywhere that we go, Lord, in regards to like alien deception, but in regards to everything, Lord, in Jesus' name, amen.
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 They bred with joy.